Hey, I'm really glad you're here. Whatever today looked like, it's over now. You've done enough. Get comfortable. Let your body sink into the bed. Let your jaw unclench. Let your breathing slow down. There's nothing you need to follow closely, nothing to figure out. You don't have to stay awake for this. Just let the sound of my voice fade into the background. And if you fall asleep halfway through a story, that's exactly what this is for. I'll keep reading. You just rest. All right, let's begin.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're doing something a little different, but still very cozy. I'm loading into this dim little Minecraft apartment of ours, with soft lantern light on the walls, slow mining in the distance, and no sudden movements, no wild music, no chaotic mobs sprinting at you from the dark. Just gentle footsteps, the quiet scrape of a pickaxe, and me talking you through some very messy relationship stories while you unwind. So, here's the plan for the night. This is going to be a long, low-energy storytelling session, the kind you can put on and just fade with. While I wander through caves and carve out tunnels block by block, I'll be reading Reddit stories about toxic relationships, partners who slowly turned controlling, friends who weaponized jokes, family members who use guilt like it was their favorite hobby. The goal isn't to hype you up. It's to help you drift off to sleep while still getting that strange, warm, fuzzy feeling of justice being served when karma really does come full circle. Now, I know, stories about gaslighting and emotional manipulation might sound a little heavy for a bedtime video, and honestly, some of them are. We'll talk about love bombing that started out as "you're my soulmate" and turned into constant tests, people who kept spreadsheets of every favor so they could cash them in later, and partners who checked phones for safety but really just wanted control. But the way we're going to handle it is soft and steady. No jump scares, no loud sound effects, no sudden cuts. Just a calm voice, slow Minecraft movements, and a steady narrative flow you can drift in and out of. If you're here to relax, go ahead and get comfortable. Adjust your pillows, grab your favorite blanket, maybe dim your own lights so they match the glow on screen. You can let this play in the background while you lie down, or even while you quietly play your own game. Think of the gentle mining sounds as little vibrations in the distance, like a neighbor padding around upstairs, but the nice kind, not the 3 a.m. party kind. I want this video to feel like a late-night friend talking softly at the edge of your bed, or on call while you're half asleep, telling you stories so you don't feel alone with your thoughts. There's no pressure to catch every detail or to stay awake until the very last story. You can close your eyes whenever you're ready, let the Minecraft world blur into background noise, and just know that the stories will keep flowing, quietly, in the dark. So, settle in, take a slow breath, and let's dive into these toxic relationship stories together, gently, calmly, and at your own pace. Why toxic relationship stories at bedtime actually work, and yeah, I know, on paper. Toxic relationship stories to help you drift off to sleep sounds like the worst idea anyone's ever had. Gaslighting, manipulation, heartbreak, right before bed. It sounds more like a 2 a.m. overthinking session than a cozy night routine. But here's the thing, when you're just listening, tucked in, with the drama happening safely in someone else's apartment or group chat, it hits completely differently. You're not in the fight. You're not the one being love-bombed, isolated from your friends, or told you're too sensitive when they cross a line. You're just a quiet observer, wrapped up in a blanket of perspective. It becomes less like reliving your own pain and more like watching the end of a movie where the villain finally runs out of tricks. That's where the emotionally cleansing part kicks in. So many of these stories are about people slowly waking up to red flags. The partner who checks their phone for safety, the friend who only shows up when you're struggling but disappears when you succeed. The family member who turns every insecurity into a joke. You hear them connect the dots, stand up for themselves, and walk away. There's this warm, fuzzy feeling of justice being served when someone who's been told no one else will ever love you finds a whole community cheering them on instead. It creates this oddly satisfying arc, almost like watching Minecraft. the same way those repetitive motions and predictable patterns calm your brain. The mining, the stacking, the soft little blocky vibrations of footsteps. These stories have their own rhythm. Toxic partner pushes. Victim doubts themselves. Evidence piles up. Breaking point. Then finally, boundaries, consequences, and that quiet moment of, oh, I'm actually free. Karma really does come full circle, and your brain loves that kind of pattern. And look, some of these tales might be exaggerated or polished up in the retelling. That's okay. What really matters here isn't whether every detail would hold up in court. It's the emotional truth underneath. Most people in toxic relationships don't recognize it at first because the behavior escalates slowly. Hearing it laid out from start to finish helps you recognize patterns, feel seen, and imagine yourself choosing better boundaries long before things ever get that bad. So as you listen tonight, welcome back to the channel, and don't feel like you have to analyze every move or diagnose every character. Just let the stories wash over you, the way the soft music and the quiet Minecraft world drift by in the background. You might notice little echoes of your own past, or you might just enjoy the gentle revenge from a safe distance. Either way, you can stay comfortable, breathe, and let your mind unwind. Because from here, we're going to slip into the actual relationship stories and watch how those red flags slowly turn into escape plans. How these Reddit stories were chosen, and what to expect. So, before we wander into the first apartment full of red flags and quiet arguments, let me pull back the curtain for a second and tell you how these stories actually made it into the video. Because I know when you're listening at night, trying to get comfortable and maybe even help you drift off to sleep, it matters that you can trust the ride you're about to go on. I spent hours scrolling through Reddit for this one. Like actual evenings of soft music in the background, Minecraft running on one monitor, and me doom scrolling subreddits like r/relationships, r/emethierhole, r/justknowso, and r/raised by narcissists on the other. Some posts were just drama for drama's sake, but the ones I kept were the stories that hit that mix of engaging and emotionally resonant, where you feel your chest tighten a little because you've either lived it or you almost did. Now, I'll be honest with you, I'm not your fact-checking police here. These are Reddit stories. Some of them might be embellished or smoothed out in hindsight. The focus tonight isn't courtroom-level evidence. It's narrative satisfaction and emotional insight. What matters is that they highlight very real patterns of toxic behavior. Things like gaslighting, love bombing, isolation, and financial control that show up in real relationships every day. You'll hear about romantic partners who start out as soulmates and slowly become controlling. At first it's, I just worry about you. And then suddenly they're checking your phone for your own safety, deciding which friends are a bad influence, and keeping a quiet spreadsheet of everything they've ever done for you. You'll notice friends who turn weirdly competitive and cruel, the ones who only cheer when you're struggling but go strangely silent when you succeed. And you'll meet family members who hide years of emotional abuse behind jokes and concern, then call you oversensitive when you finally flinch. Pattern interrupt for a second. This isn't meant to stress you out. That's why I chose stories that don't just wallow in the toxicity, but move toward a breaking point and, eventually, some form of escape or revenge. You'll see people recognize love bombing for what it is, quietly stash away money when there's financial control, or rebuild their friend circle after being isolated. It's that warm, fuzzy feeling of justice being served, even if the justice is just someone finally walking away. To keep things cozy and easy to follow, each story is self-contained, with a clear beginning, middle, and resolution. We'll start with the subtle red flags, move through the escalation, and end at the moment something finally snaps, whether that's a late-night bag being packed, a hidden phone discovered, or a long message sent to a very shocked group chat. Between each one, I'll give you a soft little reset, almost like coming up for air in the Minecraft world before we dive back down. That way, you can grab your favorite blanket, adjust your pillow, and let the next set of vibrations from these stories roll over you. From here, we're going to slide into our first relationship tale, where perfect love starts to feel just a little too perfect. From cozy chat to first story, slipping into narrative mode. From here, we're going to slide into that first relationship tale, and after this, I'm going to let the stories do most of the talking. Think of it like we're shifting from a cozy chat on the couch into a quiet audiobook that just happens to be playing over some peaceful Minecraft mining. For the rest of the night, you'll hear first-person Reddit stories from people who slowly realized their relationships weren't just a little rocky, they were quietly toxic. Some of them were dealing with love bombing that felt like a fairy tale at first. Others had partners who used money, guilt, or jokes to chip away at their confidence. A few thought they were simply bad at relationships, until they noticed patterns that lined up almost perfectly with what therapists warn about. I'm going to ease us out of the chatty host mode now. The pace will stay slow and bedtime friendly, but the voice will sink a bit deeper into the moment, into the rooms, the messages, the late night arguments that leave you staring at the ceiling of your apartment. Less commentary, more immersion. I'll still pop in between stories to give you that soft reset and that warm, fuzzy feeling of justice being served, when karma really does come full circle. So, welcome back to the channel if you've been here before. And if you're new, you can treat this like a calm little story party where you don't have to say a word. Just listen. Let the music, the gentle Minecraft sounds, and the words blend together. If you're trying to help you drift off to sleep, this is your cue to adjust your volume, dim the lights, and maybe grab your favorite blanket if you haven't already. You'll hear about gaslighting, but through everyday moments. A partner checking your phone for your own safety, then using it to monitor you. A boyfriend who keeps a spreadsheet of every favor he's done, then pulls it out like a bill whenever you say no. A girlfriend who cries dramatically when you try to leave, but laughs when you're the one in tears. Nothing too loud or jump scare intense, just that slow, dawning horror that something is very wrong. Followed, eventually, by the quiet power of someone finally walking away. Our first story leans right into that. It starts with what looks like a perfect soulmate. Flowers for no reason, surprise dinners, long, dreamy texts that buzz your phone, first thing in the morning and last thing at night. At first it feels like a movie montage, the kind of love bombing people write poems about. But then, one by one, those sweet gestures start to feel like little tests. Did you answer fast enough? Did you gush enough? Did you cancel plans with friends to prove they're your priority? Settle in, close your eyes if you want, and just follow along with the narrator's words while the Minecraft world rolls calmly in the background. Our first story comes from someone who thought they'd found the love of their life, until they noticed one tiny detail that changed everything. Story 1, the soulmate whose love was actually a test. So, welcome back to the channel and grab your favorite blanket, because this one starts out like a cozy little rom-com and then quietly turns into a spreadsheet horror story. I met him at a friend's apartment on a quiet Friday night. No loud music, no party chaos, just a few of us talking and the soft hum of someone's lo-fi playlist in the background. He zeroed in on me immediately, like a spotlight had clicked on. Within an hour, he was telling me I was different, that he felt like he'd known me forever, that this felt like fate. It was intense, but in that early, floaty way that can feel kind of magical when you're tired of bad dates. The next morning, there was a long, beautifully written message waiting for me. Paragraphs about how our vibrations matched, how he'd never clicked with anyone like this. Then came the surprise coffee deliveries to my office, little gifts left on my doorstep, constant compliments. He'd say things like, "I just want to make your life easier," and "You deserve to feel this cherished every day." When you've had a rough dating history, that kind of attention can feel like winning the emotional lottery. But every sweet gesture had a tiny string attached. If I didn't respond within a few minutes, he'd joke, lightly at first, about my slow replies. If I said I couldn't talk because I was out with friends, he'd send a sad selfie or a "guess I'm not your priority tonight" text. When he cooked dinner for me after work, he'd watch my face a little too closely, like he was grading my gratitude. I told myself he was just sensitive, romantic. A little needy, maybe, but in a cute way. Over time, the mood shifted. He started making comments like, "I canceled my plans for you 3 times last week." Or, "Remember when I drove you to the airport at 4 a.m.? Most boyfriends wouldn't. Arguments always came with a recap of his greatest hits. If I wanted a quiet night alone, he'd remind me of every favor he'd done, like I was breaking some invisible contract. I felt guilty for wanting basic space. The breaking point came on a rainy Sunday when he asked me to grab his laptop from his bag while he made tea. A spreadsheet was open on the screen. At first, I thought it was work. Then I saw the title, OP Investments versus Returns. My name and a file name, like I was a project. There were dates, descriptions, and numbers. Drove her to work, no thanks text. Surprised her with lunch. She didn't post about it. She went out with friends after I bought her flowers. Next to each line, he'd added little notes about my reactions. Smiled a lot. Seemed distracted. Didn't seem grateful enough. He had a whole column for loyalty indicators. I felt my stomach drop. Love wasn't love here. It was data. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He got defensive. He said, I have to track these things or I'll get taken advantage of. Relationships are about balance. I do so much for you, and you barely do anything back. He listed every ride, every gift, every late night call he'd answered, like he was reading an invoice. The notebook in his nightstand matched the spreadsheet, handwritten tallies of my slights. The way I'd looked at my phone during a movie. The time I didn't answer a call because I was in the shower. The night I chose my best friend's birthday over an extra date night with him. Something clicked in my brain then. I remembered reading about love bombing, about how manipulators pour on affection early to hook you, then slowly start tightening the leash. I thought about how I'd stopped seeing my friends as much, how every no felt dangerous because it would trigger a guilt trip. This wasn't romance, it was control with pretty wrapping paper. I ended it that week. No dramatic fight, no long explanation. I told him I didn't want a relationship where my affection was measured in cells and columns, where every act of kindness had a price tag. He cried, then got angry, then tried one last tactic, reminding me of everything he'd done. But once you see the ledger, you can't unsee it. Walking away was terrifying and weirdly quiet. I blocked his number, sat on my couch, and just listened to the apartment silence for a while. It felt comfortable, for the first time in months. I realized that real love doesn't need proof or screenshots or a running tally to justify its existence. Real love doesn't keep score, it keeps you safe. So if any part of this story feels a little too familiar, consider this your gentle reminder. Being cherished shouldn't feel like being audited. And as we move into the next story, we're going to look at what happens when someone like this doesn't just track your emotions, but your money too. Let's dive into that one and see how karma really does come full circle in the most unexpectedly cozy way possible to help you drift off to sleep. Micro reset, spotting love bombing before it hooks you. So before we dive into that money side of things, I want to hit a little pause button with you. Not a full stop, just a micro reset, so your brain can stretch, your shoulders can drop, and you can actually feel what that first story stirred up. In that relationship, all that early affection felt almost unreal, right? Constant messages, constant attention, constant, you're my everything. On the surface, it sounds like the kind of romance you see in movies. Good morning texts, good night texts, surprise visits, big gestures that make your apartment feel like the center of the universe. But underneath, it wasn't really about love. It was about control, about needing constant validation, about making sure the other person never felt quite safe saying no. Most people don't clock that at first, and honestly, that's not a character flaw. Research shows a lot of toxic relationships start out looking like ideal ones. Everything escalates slowly, like turning up the music at a party one notch at a time. At first it's sweet, then it's flattering, then it's a little much. By the time it's overwhelming, you're already emotionally invested and a little sleep deprived from all the late night calls. That's where love bombing sneaks in. Think about someone texting you all day, every day, getting upset if you don't reply within a few minutes. Or talking about moving in together in week 2, planning future kids before you've even had your first quiet Sunday morning. Maybe they send huge gifts early on, things that feel too big for how long you've known each other, and then bring those gifts up later like a receipt. You try to slow the pace, ask for a calm night alone, and suddenly they're pouting, guilt tripping, or picking a fight because you don't care enough. If any of that feels a little too familiar, take a slow breath with me. Feeling flattered by attention is completely normal. You're not dramatic or ungrateful for enjoying romance. Love bombing only really turns into a red flag when the affection is tied to pressure, guilt, or punishment. The moment "I miss you" quietly becomes "you're not allowed to have boundaries." That's when the cozy glow starts to burn. So as you're lying there, maybe with Minecraft blocks gently clicking in the background, to help you drift off to sleep, this is your gentle reminder. Real care doesn't panic when you say, "not tonight." It doesn't keep score. It doesn't need a spreadsheet of every nice thing it's ever done. And while that first story was about romantic intensity, the next one gets a little sneakier. We're moving into the world of a supportive friend, the kind who always shows up with tissues and advice, but somehow uses your bad nights as their favorite kind of entertainment. No big gifts this time, just emotional "I owe us." Welcome back to the channel. Grab your favorite blanket and let's dive into how karma really does come full circle when someone starts treating comfort like a form of quiet revenge. Story 2. The friend who only loved you when you were broken. So this story comes from an OP who thought they'd hit the friendship jackpot. You know that one person who shows up at 2 a.m. with ice cream when your relationship explodes, or answers on the first ring when your car dies outside your apartment? That was Lena. For years, every major crisis in OP's life had Lena's fingerprints all over it. Long, cozy nights on the couch, soft music in the background, and a running script of, "You deserve better. I'm the only one who really gets you." At first, it felt like the kind of support you dream about. Break up. Lena was there with snacks and a running commentary about how awful the ex was. Job loss. She helped OP rewrite their resume and sent "you've got this" texts all night. Family drama. She'd listen for hours, nodding along, offering advice that sounded comforting, even if it never really led anywhere. The pattern was subtle. Whenever OP was at rock bottom, Lena was practically living in their apartment. But when things started to go well, Lena somehow got busy. OP noticed it the first time they landed a better job. They called Lena, excited, ready to share the good news. Lena's response? A flat "nice," followed by an immediate subject change to her own stressful week. No "congrats," no "I'm proud of you." Just a shrug in verbal form. When OP tried again later, mentioning the raise and how comfortable life was starting to feel, Lena hit them with a backhanded, "Must be nice. Don't forget what it was like when you were struggling, though. That's when you were really humble." Over time, the comments stacked up like little emotional paper cuts. Every success got minimized. If OP mentioned a new relationship that felt healthy, Lena would bring up the cheating ex, almost like she was trying to summon old pain back into the room. If OP talked about feeling more confident, Lena would remind them of the nights they cried on her couch, as if their growth was a betrayal of the role she'd cast herself in. Then OP started to see the manipulative pattern underneath. Lena only initiated contact when OP posted something sad, vague, or stressed. Happy posts? Silence. She'd show up instantly for breakdowns, but forget every celebration. Birthdays, promotion parties, even a small game night when OP wanted to chill. Cozy evening to mark a personal win. Her advice always leaned towards staying small. Are you sure that job isn't too much for you? Moving might be risky. Your anxiety was so bad last time. It was wrapped in concern, but the vibrations underneath were clear. Stay broken so I can be the hero. The realization hit one quiet night when OP was scrolling back through old messages. Wall-to-wall comfort whenever they were falling apart. Ghost town whenever they were okay. That kind of pattern eats at you. OP started to wonder, have I been keeping myself in crisis just to keep this friendship alive? So they decided to test it. Nothing dramatic, just a small, safe win. OP texted Lena, "Hey, I got invited to speak at a little work event. I'm nervous, but kind of proud of myself." They waited, expecting at least "you'll do great." Instead, Lena replied, "Careful. You're starting to sound like one of those people who thinks they're better than everyone. Remember who was there when you were a mess." That one line sat there on the screen, heavier than any breakup text. And as OP stared at it, they realized this might not have been comfort at all. It might have been control, and the next thing Lena said would finally prove it. When support turns into a cage, emotional dependency. Explained Lena's next message finally said the quiet part out loud. If you keep changing like this, I don't know if we'll even relate anymore. And that's where we need to pause the story for a second, because this is exactly where support can quietly turn into a cage. On the surface, having someone who's always there for you sounds cozy and comforting. When you're crying on the bathroom floor at 2 a.m, that friend who picks up the phone feels like a lifeline. Healthy emotional support does that, but then gently nudges you toward your own strength. It celebrates when you can finally sleep through the night without calling, when you handle a panic attack with tools you learned in therapy, instead of leaning only on them. Toxic support looks similar at first, but there's a twist. Instead of cheering when you take a step on your own, the person subtly pulls you back. In OP's case, every time they mentioned therapy or new boundaries, Lena jokingly reminded them of their worst nights. She replayed the highlight reel of their lowest moments, like a late-night music video marathon no one actually asked for. The message was clear. Remember, you're the broken one, and I'm the one who fixes you. Sometimes this sabotage is unconscious. Sometimes it's very deliberate. A friend might forget to pass along a job lead because, well, what if you move to a nicer apartment and make new friends? They might roll their eyes when you talk about a hobby that doesn't include them, or suddenly start a small emotional party whenever your life falls apart, because crisis is where they feel important. They're not comfortable when you're comfortable. Underneath that, there's often a quiet fear. If you heal, will you leave me behind? For some toxic friends, your struggle is their job security. As long as you're the one crying, they get to be the hero in the story. Growth feels like rejection to them, so they keep you small in the name of just being honest or keeping you grounded. Karma really does come full circle in these stories, but in the moment, it just feels like guilt. This is where I gently invite you to do a little check-in with your own life. Who actually celebrates your wins, even the small ones? Who only texts when there's drama or seems most animated when something has gone wrong? And is there anyone you feel oddly safer around when you're doing badly, because success makes the air between you go cold? Welcome back to the channel Moments Like This, where we zoom out from the revenge and just sit with what these stories are really showing you. Grab your favorite blanket, let's dive into one more angle of control, because emotional dependency isn't the only cage people build. In the next story, the support doesn't come in late-night phone calls or endless advice. It comes in the form of money, help with bills, and a slowly tightening grip on someone's entire life, one transfer at a time. And just like with Lena, it all starts out sounding generous. Story 3, the partner who paid for everything and owned you so. Grab your favorite blanket, because this next one looks soft and cozy on the outside, and then quietly turns into a financial chokehold. This is the story of how "I'll take care of everything" slowly became "I own you," one bill at a time. When I met him, it felt like winning the relationship lottery. He insisted on paying for our first date, second date, every bit of food, every ride back to my apartment. He'd wave his card and joke, "Your money's no good around me." It sounded romantic, protective, like something out of those late-night movie marathons you fall asleep to, with gentle music in the background. By month 3, he was covering my half of the rent, just until you're less stressed. Then it was the internet, the utilities, the streaming services. If I grabbed a coffee, he'd be mildly offended. "Why didn't you let me get it? I like spoiling you." It's hard to argue with someone who's making your life more comfortable, right? Then came the helpful suggestion. He'd text me during my shift. "You're always so tired. You should cut back your hours. I make plenty." When I hesitated, he framed it like a love story. "I want you to relax. Focus on us. I've got you." I know, on paper it sounds sweet. But remember, most people in toxic relationships don't recognize it at first, because it escalates slowly. So I cut back. Fewer hours, less income, more time in his world. He started driving me everywhere, so you don't have to waste money on gas or buses. He added me to his phone plan, so you never have to worry about overages. Little by little, every practical thread in my life ran through his hands. That's when the tone shifted. If I bought something small, like a book or a game to watch, while I let Minecraft blocks stack and fall me towards sleep, he'd raise an eyebrow. Do you really need that? I mean, I'm paying for everything already. Disagreements ended with, you'd be homeless without me, or maybe I should stop paying for your stuff if you're going to talk to me like that. Gratitude stopped being a feeling and became a demand. He didn't like my friends, either. Not because they were mean, but because they didn't contribute. If they invited me to a night out, he'd say, funny how they only show up when I'm footing the bill. Rides were monitored, phone usage questioned. Who are you texting this late? Isolation wrapped around me like a blanket that was just a little too tight. The breaking point came one quiet night when a bank email popped up on his laptop while he was in the shower. I wasn't snooping. The subject line literally had my name. Curious, I clicked. There it was. A credit card I'd never seen, maxed out, with my name on it and his email as the contact. Furniture, electronics, random party supplies, all sitting in our apartment. Technically, my debt. My stomach dropped. Suddenly, all that generosity looked like a trap with my signature on it. And lying there in the glow of the screen, I realized I wasn't just financially dependent, I was financially buried. That was the moment the cozy story snapped. Stay, and let the debt and control get deeper, or find a way out before karma really does come full circle. We'll get to how OP plans that escape in a minute, but first, let's dive into what happens when the controlling partner isn't just playing with money. They're playing with your reality. Financial red flags. When "I'll take care of you" isn't romantic. So when someone says, "Don't worry, I'll take care of you," it can sound like the sweetest line in the world, until you realize the price tag is your freedom. Welcome back to the channel, and if you haven't yet, grab your favorite blanket, because this is where the cozy vibe meets some uncomfortable truth. There is a huge difference between, hey, you focus on school and I'll cover more of the bills for a while, and you don't need to work, I make enough for both of us. The first one is a plan you both talk through, with timelines, goals, and respect. The second one often comes with invisible strings, like a quiet little contract you never actually signed. On paper, both look generous. In practice, one keeps you comfortable, the other keeps you trapped. Healthy support sounds like, let's dive into our budget together, and do you feel okay with this? It's mutually agreed, and both people still have access to money, information, and choices. The toxic version is, money stresses you out, I'll handle everything, followed by them insisting on handling all the money, helpfully discouraging you from working, or making you feel guilty for wanting your own account. It's less partner, more parent with a credit card. Some of the clearest red flags show up in the tiny, everyday moments. They demand access to all your accounts for transparency, but somehow their passwords are always complicated or private. They track every purchase, questioning the coffee you bought or the $5 you sent a friend, while their own spending is mysteriously off limits. They might even cancel your card by accident, then make you wait for them to be available so you can buy groceries. It's financial revenge for daring to have needs. And here's where it quietly connects to something even darker: isolation. Research keeps finding that being cut off from friends and family is one of the strongest predictors of abuse. Financial control is one of the easiest ways to make that happen. If they control the car, the gas, the ride shares, the phone plan, the fun money, suddenly visiting your sister, grabbing coffee with a coworker, or going to a party in another apartment building gets framed as wasteful, unsafe, or selfish. Before you know it, your whole world is them. If any part of you wants your own money, your own card, your own savings, and you feel guilty about that, breathe. Wanting financial independence is not a lack of trust. It's a basic human need. You're allowed to have autonomy and still be in love. You're allowed to say, I appreciate the help, but I also need my own safety net, without writing a 10-page essay defending yourself. Because once someone has your wallet and your world, the next move is often your mind. That's where we head next, the gaslighting. The "you're remembering it wrong," the "you're too sensitive," the slow, gentle vibrations that shake your confidence until you can't tell if the apartment is crooked or you are. Stay tucked in, because our next story shows how they don't just rewrite the budget, they rewrite your reality. Story 4, The Gaslighter Who Rewrote Every Argument. So, welcome back to the channel and stay cozy, because this next one is like watching someone slowly turn down the dimmer switch on their own mind. On paper, OP's boyfriend was a catch. Charming, witty, the kind of guy who could walk into a party, crack 3 jokes, and suddenly everyone was orbiting around him like he was the main character. In public, he was all soft smiles and, "Can I get you anything, babe?" In private, it was different. Little cutting comments slipped between normal moments, like tiny shards in otherwise comfortable blankets. He'd poke at her insecurities, then grin and say, "Relax, I'm just joking. You're so sensitive." The first few times she laughed it off. People tease, couples tease. It felt normal until it didn't. The early gaslighting was almost gentle, like those barely there vibrations in an apartment you only notice late at night. He'd say something cruel about her body or her friends, she'd flinch, and later bring it up. Instantly, he'd tilt his head and smile. "I never said that. You must have misheard." Or, "Wow, you really love drama, huh?" If they argued, the argument itself magically changed shape afterward. She'd remember him yelling. He'd insist they'd had a calm discussion, and she'd blown it out of proportion. Over time, disagreements became slippery. Every time she tried to pin one down, it wriggled away. He'd insist she'd started the fight, that she'd used words she knew she hadn't. When she looked confused, he'd sigh and say, "You know your memory isn't great. It's okay. I'll remember for both of us." That sounds caring on the surface, but you can feel the trap there, right? Then it escalated. Objects started moving. Her keys, always on the hook by the door, suddenly lost. He'd find them in the bathroom cabinet and raise an eyebrow. "You really need to get more sleep." Plans they'd made, dinners, movie nights, meeting her friends, would mysteriously vanish from his schedule. She'd show up dressed and ready. He'd swear they'd never agreed to anything. "You must have dreamed it," he'd chuckle, already turning back to his game. The worst part was when he started pulling other people into his version. After a disagreement, he'd come back with, "I told Mark and Jenna about this, and they agreed you were overreacting." She hadn't been there. She had no idea what he'd actually said. But hearing mutual friends' names attached to his story made it feel heavier, more real, like the whole world was gently nudging her to admit she was the problem. That's when OP's confusion thickened into fog. She started keeping notes in her phone. Dates, times, exact phrases. She'd reread text threads late at night, scrolling under the glow of her screen while the Minecraft music of her life played softly in the background. The messages looked normal, but the way he described them later never matched. It was like living in 2 overlapping realities and never knowing which one was solid. Sleep got worse. Her appetite dipped. She stopped trusting that flicker in her gut that said, "No, that's not how it happened." And the more she doubted herself, the more he leaned in with that patient, patronizing tone. "See, this is why you need me." Anyone else would leave. One night after another, you're remembering it wrong conversation about a fight she knew she hadn't started. Something in her finally snapped, but quietly. No yelling, no dramatic revenge speech. Just a calm, almost numb decision. She opened a notes app, tested her phone's voice recorder, and set it face down on the table before their next talk. Let's dive into the moment where reality and his story finally collide, because when she pressed play later and heard what he'd actually said, karma really does come full circle. Micro reset, gaslighting, sanity, and quiet validation. When she finally listened back to that recording and heard his exact words, side by side with what he later claimed he'd said, it was like watching a magic trick fall apart in slow motion. The spell breaks, the lights come up, and you realize the magician just had cards up his sleeve the whole time. Before we dive into the next round of chaos and control, I want to give you a tiny breather here. Some of these stories hit way too close to home, especially if you've ever been told you're too sensitive, overreacting, or remembering wrong whenever you tried to talk about something that hurt you. That kind of thing sounds minor on paper, but when it's every argument, every disagreement, every quiet conversation at 1 a.m., it can make your whole brain feel like a funhouse mirror. Gaslighting is one of those words that gets thrown around a lot online, so let's keep it really simple. It's not just, we remember that movie line differently, or, no, I'm pretty sure it was Tuesday, not Wednesday. Gaslighting is a pattern of someone repeatedly making you question your own reality, your memory, your feelings, your sanity. Over time, their version of events becomes the truth, and you start treating your own mind like it's the unreliable one. That's why people in these stories start doing things that might look a little odd from the outside. Keeping a notes app full of dates and quotes, screenshotting texts, emailing themselves conversations, saving voicemails. If you've ever done that, just to reassure yourself you're not losing it, you're not weird, you're not petty. That's a completely understandable reaction to ongoing manipulation. It's your brain trying to put down anchors in a relationship that keeps moving the floor under your feet. If you're feeling your chest tighten a bit, or your stomach drop as you listen, that's okay too. You can always let the Minecraft world take over for a while. Just watch the little character wander around the apartment builds, listen to the soft music, and let the gentle, blocky vibrations on screen help you drift off to sleep if you need a break from the heavy stuff. You don't have to catch every single detail of every story to be here. And hey, welcome back to the channel if you've been through this kind of thing before and still chose to press play tonight. There's a strange kind of cozy comfort in hearing other people put words to the patterns you live through. It doesn't erase what happened, but it can give you that warm, fuzzy feeling of justice being served, even if the revenge is just someone finally believing you. Pattern interrupt for your brain here. Gaslighting isn't only about twisting your memory. Sometimes, when controlling your reality stops working, the next move is to control your environment instead. Who you see, who you talk to, and who might quietly say, "Hey, this isn't normal." So in the next story, we're shifting from mind games to social circles. Not just control over what you remember, but over your friends, your family, and anyone who might help you see the truth. Let's dive into what happens when someone tries to turn your whole support system into their personal chessboard, and karma really does come full circle. Story 5, the partner who slowly erased everyone else. So, grab your favorite blanket for this one because on the surface, it starts out really cozy. This is one of those stories where, if you just heard the first month, you'd think, wow, relationship goals. And then by month 12, you're wondering how your entire life got rearranged without you noticing. When I met him, he was Mr. Inclusive. He was the first partner who actually wanted to come to my friends' game nights, who remembered everyone's names, who laughed at my brother's terrible party stories like they were stand-up comedy. At my mom's birthday, he helped in the kitchen, charmed my dad with music recommendations, and made my cousins feel comfortable enough to joke with him. Everyone told me, "You finally picked a good one." And honestly, I believed them. At first, it felt like the perfect fit. We'd have quiet nights in my apartment, Minecraft on the screen, cozy background music, and my phone buzzing with group chats. He'd nudge me and say, half teasing, "You're so popular, I have competition." It sounded cute, it sounded like love. I didn't realize it was the opening move. The shift was slow. One evening, after I came back from seeing my best friend, he sighed and said, "I don't know. She just seems like kind of a bad influence. You always come back stressed after hanging out with her." Another time, about a different friend. "He doesn't really get us. He jokes about our relationship a lot. I feel like he doesn't respect you." Tiny comments, said softly, like he was just looking out for me. I started defending my friends, then started wondering if he had a point. Whenever I actually went out without him, there was a cost. I'd come home to him sulking on the couch, controller untouched, saying, "It's fine, I'm just not used to sleeping alone." If I planned a night out, suddenly he'd have a crisis, a rough day at work, a mysterious stomach ache, a fight he needed to finish before I left. More than once, I texted people last minute, canceling because something came up. It felt easier to stay home than deal with the emotional vibrations afterward. The realization didn't hit all at once. It was more like waking up in the middle of the night and noticing the apartment is too quiet. I opened my phone and saw I'd been muted in a group chat for weeks. A friend messaged, "We figured you were busy, you never come anymore." Another admitted they stopped inviting me because it always seemed like my boyfriend didn't want me there. My world had shrunk to work, him, and sleep. The real crack came from my sister. She texted me late one night. "Hey, are you okay? He told me you don't really like hanging out with us anymore, and that we stress you out. That didn't sound like you." And there it was. While I thought he was protecting our relationship, he'd been quietly telling my own family that I didn't want them, rewriting my story behind my back. In the next part, I'll tell you what I did when I realized my inclusive partner had been erasing everyone else from my life, and how karma really does come full circle when you start pulling on those threads. Isolation tactics, when your world quietly shrinks. So, welcome back to the channel and to that moment where things stop feeling like protecting the relationship and start feeling like your whole life is being quietly edited. Isolation doesn't usually show up like a movie villain, slamming doors and banning you from seeing people. It's softer than that at first. It sounds like, "I just want more time with you," or "Your friends don't really get us." Cozy on the surface, but there's a draft underneath if you sit with it long enough. It's totally normal, by the way, to see your friends a little less when you're in that early honeymoon phase. You're excited, you're texting nonstop. You're having those late-night talks that stretch way past when you meant to go to sleep. But a healthy partner doesn't make you choose between them and everyone else. They might tease you about missing a game night, sure, but they're not pouting for 3 days because you went to a birthday party without them. Let's dive into how it usually creeps in. Maybe every time you're about to go out, they pick a fight right before you leave. Nothing huge, just enough to make you feel guilty walking out the door. Or they insist on being included in everything, even low-key coffee catch-ups that used to be just you and your best friend. At first it sounds flattering. They just love being around me. But somehow, the more they show up, the less you talk honestly when they're there. Then you start hearing little comments about your people. "Your sister is kind of dramatic, don't you think? Your coworker seems jealous of us. Your friends don't respect our relationship." One by one, they plant these tiny doubts, and anytime you do reconnect with someone they don't like, there's fallout waiting at home. Cold shoulders, dramatic music level sighs, or a full-blown argument about how you abandoned them. It's like your social life becomes this booby-trapped apartment where every door sets off an alarm. Researchers actually point out that isolation is one of the strongest predictors that a relationship might turn abusive. It's not just about being clingy. When someone cuts you off from friends, family, hobbies, even coworkers you trust, they're removing outside perspectives and support systems. No more best friend saying, "Hey, that didn't sound like you." No more sibling raising an eyebrow. Just their version of the story on repeat until it starts to sound like the only truth. So as you're lying there tonight, maybe with Minecraft music in the background, to help you drift off to sleep, it might be worth a gentle check-in with yourself. Do you feel freer or more limited in your relationship? Can you make plans without rehearsing the argument you'll have later? Can you share your real opinions, keep old connections, and text who you want, without that little spike of fear? Healthy love might be intense sometimes, but it doesn't require you to shrink. And in the next story, we're going to see what happens when that shrinking world bumps into something it can't ignore anymore. A secret second phone, a double life, and friends who were waving red flags long before OP was ready to see them. That's where the warm, fuzzy feeling of justice being served starts to peek through. Because when you finally stop shrinking, karma really does come full circle. Story 6. The other phone my friends warned me about, so. Welcome back to the channel and to this next one that starts with a feeling a lot of you might recognize. Everyone around you sees the problem, except you. Our storyteller, let's call her Mia, is in that cozy honeymoon phase where every text feels like music, every late night call feels like fate, and her new boyfriend, Jake, is this charming, slightly mysterious guy who just doesn't vibe with drama. Conveniently, all of her friends are apparently drama. From the very beginning, her group chat is throwing gentle shade. One friend says he gives walking red flag at a party energy. Another says something about his vibes being off, like an apartment with nice furniture, but weird vibrations in the walls you can't quite place. Mia laughs it off. She tells you she honestly thought they were jealous or being judgmental because Jake is a little older, has his life together, and showers her with affection. Love bombing never calls itself love bombing in the moment. It just feels like finally being chosen. But then there are these tiny inconsistencies. Jake texts nonstop for a few days, then goes weirdly quiet for hours, only to come back with vague, copy-paste excuses. Sorry, crazy day. Phone died, LOL. He always puts his phone face down on the table, even when it's just the two of them watching Minecraft builds and trying to fall asleep. If it buzzes, he flips it away from her like it's shy. At restaurants, he'll get up, take work calls outside, and come back 10 minutes later looking a little too cheerful for someone allegedly talking to his boss. Her friends keep nudging. One swears she saw him at night in another part of town, holding hands with someone who definitely wasn't Mia. Another sends screenshots of a dating profile that looks suspiciously like Jake. Same tattoos, same dog, different name. Mia feels that first crack in her certainty. She wants to defend him, to stay loyal, but there's this low hum of doubt under everything now, like background vibrations you only notice when the room gets quiet. Then one weekend, it stops being theoretical. They're driving back from a weekend trip, sleepy, comfortable, music low to help you drift off to sleep if you're just listening along. At a gas station, Mia reaches into his gym bag in the back seat to grab a hoodie. Her fingers close around a second phone, not his usual one. Different case, different size, powered on. She tells herself it's probably an old phone, a work phone, something reasonable. But the screen lights up with a preview. Can't wait to see you tonight, babe. Different name, heart emoji. Her stomach drops. She unlocks it easily. The passcode is their anniversary. Inside is a parallel universe, dating apps with recent logins. Text threads with multiple women, all getting the same recycled lines. One conversation is a full relationship. I love waking up next to you. Our future apartment. Our kids. It's like watching her own story, just with the name swapped out. When she confronts him in the car, shaking, phone in hand, he doesn't apologize. He doesn't even look surprised. Instead, he goes straight into this cold, practiced script. Why was she going through his things? Did she realize how controlling and paranoid she sounded? If she trusted him, none of this would be an issue. Maybe she's the toxic one. Maybe he should rethink being with someone so insecure. And sitting there, with hard evidence glowing in her palm, Mia actually starts to wonder if he's right. Until one tiny specific detail on that other phone snaps everything into focus. And that's where this story takes a very different turn. Micro reset. Trusting your gut and your friends. That tiny detail on the other phone, we'll come back to that in a second, because this is where I want you to take a little micro reset with me. Welcome back to the channel if you've drifted in mid-story, and if you're already tucked in, grab your favorite blanket, get comfortable, and just let your shoulders drop for a moment. These stories can hit close to home, especially when they brush up against your own memories of that one ex or that one friend who made every night feel a little less cozy than it should have been. Hearing anything bad about someone you love is brutally hard. When you're in it, you're seeing the cute texts, the inside jokes, the sleepy goodnight calls over soft music, not the patterns your friends are quietly clocking from the outside. A lot of people only realize, way later, lying awake in a different apartment after the breakup, that their best friend's overreaction was actually the first honest description of what was going on. And the thing is, the people who love you, the ones who have been there since before this relationship, who've seen you at your happiest and your absolute messiest, they usually aren't bringing you concerns for fun. There's no revenge high in telling your friend, hey, I don't like how he talks to you, and then watching them get defensive. It's awkward. It can kill the vibe of the party. But they still do it, because your well-being matters more to them than keeping the conversation light. Here's where your gut and your people kind of team up. If one random coworker says, he seems off, you can shrug it off. But if your sister, your roommate, and your oldest friend, people who've always shown steady, boring, reliable care, are all quietly saying versions of the same thing, that's worth a pause. Not a dramatic breakup on the spot, just slowing down. watching more closely, noticing how you feel after you hang up or after they leave your place at night. If you've ignored those red flags before, that doesn't make you foolish. It makes you hopeful. You wanted to believe the best. You were probably hearing, "You're overthinking, you're too sensitive, you're making me feel attacked." On repeat, and gaslighting like that can make anybody doubt their own memory and judgment over time. Missing the signs at first isn't a personal failure. It's part of how slowly toxic behavior usually creeps in. Pattern interrupt for your brain here. Imagine a partner so focused on keeping score that they literally open a spreadsheet to argue. Not metaphorically. An actual document, line by line, of every favor they've ever done, ready to weaponize whenever you try to set a boundary. Because while Mia is staring at that second phone, putting puzzle pieces together, our next storyteller is about to discover that their partner hasn't just been keeping receipts in their head. They've been tracking every coffee, every ride, every tiny act of kindness. And when karma really does come full circle, that cold, calculated list becomes the warm, fuzzy feeling of justice being served. Story 7. The spreadsheet of every favor he ever did so. Welcome back to the channel and grab your favorite blanket, because this next one feels calm and organized on the surface, and then slowly turns into something that might keep you up at night instead of helping you drift off to sleep. OP starts by telling us that their boyfriend, we'll call him Ethan, seemed like the definition of responsible. Color-coded calendar on the fridge, shared budget app, reminders for bills, appointments, even when to take the trash down from the apartment before the truck came. At first it felt cozy and safe, like dating a human planner who just wanted life to run smoothly. In the beginning, that organization looked really sweet. He made spreadsheets for saving for vacations, tracked their grocery spending so they could cook instead of ordering late-night party food, even set up a rotation for chores so neither of them would feel overwhelmed. OP had been in chaotic relationships before, so this felt like the opposite of toxic. This felt mature. But then little things started to feel off. During a small argument about dishes, Ethan said, "I've done the dishes the last 6 times, actually." Not, "I feel like I've done more," but a weirdly precise number. OP laughed it off, thinking he was just exaggerating, but he doubled down. "No, really, 6. The way he said it stuck in OP's brain like a splinter. One night, while Ethan was in the shower and his laptop was open on the table, a tab caught OP's eye. A spreadsheet titled Household and Relationship Contributions. Curiosity 1. OP clicked, and there it was. Months of entries, date, description, and a column literally labeled for OP. Drove OP to airport, 40 minutes each way. Bought OP's favorite takeout, didn't ask for split. Listened to OP vent about work for 2 hours. Every chore, every gift, every tiny favor, logged with almost scientific detail. Some even had notes like, "OP didn't say thank you," or "Remind OP of this next time we argue." You can almost feel the vibrations of that realization through the screen. Once OP had seen it, they couldn't unsee it. During arguments, Ethan started pulling out his phone or opening that file. "You say I don't support you, but look," and he'd scroll. "On March 3rd, I picked you up from that party at 1 a.m. On April 10th, I paid for the concert tickets. On May 2nd, I cleaned the whole apartment while you napped." OP's efforts? Brushed off as just normal stuff. His were above and beyond, apparently owed interest. The cozy feeling of being cared for turned into walking through a mental ledger. Nothing was freely given. Everything was an investment. If OP wanted to say no to something, moving cities for his job, skipping a night with friends because he wanted company, he'd sigh and say, "After everything I've done for you," and the spreadsheet would appear like a weapon. The breaking point came when OP scrolled further down and realized it wasn't just favors. It was vulnerabilities. OP cried about dad today, seemed really weak. OP forgot to pay phone bill again, pattern of irresponsibility. Their worst moments, their private confessions, logged like data points in a case file. That's when the spreadsheet stopped being organized and became a chilling symbol that this relationship wasn't love, it was accounting. And as OP is quietly planning their exit, our next storyteller is about to find out what happens when someone like Ethan doesn't just keep receipts, they start rewriting them in public. Scorekeeping versus partnership. When love becomes a ledger, scorekeeping is where relationships start to feel less like love and more like a weird little courtroom you never agreed to walk into. One day you're just trying to have a cozy night, the next you're mentally cross-examining yourself like, did I do enough dishes to earn this nap? Now, wanting fairness is totally normal. You're not wrong for noticing when you're always the one cleaning the apartment, or planning the birthday parties, or remembering everyone's allergies. But when every tiny thing turns into a tally mark, the relationship stops feeling like a partnership and starts feeling like a business transaction. You cooked, so they owe you. They drove last time, so you win this round. That's not love, that's store credit. There's a big difference between practical tools and emotional ledgers. A shared expense app so you can split rent, groceries, or that one ridiculous music festival. Super reasonable. It keeps things clear, helps you both sleep at night, and nobody has to be the human calculator. But secretly tracking every favor, every chore, every I listen to you cry at 2 a.m. so you can slam it down later like a revenge receipt in an argument, that's where it turns toxic. In a lot of these Reddit stories, the scorekeeping is just the surface. Underneath, there's this slow, sour buildup of resentment or entitlement. One partner starts to believe, because I pay more, or because I do more emotional labor, they get extra decision-making power. Suddenly, it's not our vacation, it's my vacation, because I earned it. They use their contributions like a crown, and the other person is quietly demoted to servant. Healthy couples still care about fairness, they just handle it differently. Instead of, well, I did the laundry up 5 times this week, it sounds more like, hey, I'm feeling really burned out. Can we renegotiate who does what? Instead of hoarding examples for the next fight, they bring it up when it's small and fixable, and they say thank you. A lot. Not the fake kind that really means, I'll remember this later, but the simple, I see what you did, and I appreciate you, with no invoice attached. It's wild how far a little gratitude goes. When you feel seen, you don't need a secret spreadsheet. You don't lie awake at night rehearsing your closing arguments. You can just rest. Let the cozy Minecraft blocks on screen stack up. Let the gentle vibrations of the background music help you drift off to sleep, and trust that you're on the same team. And of course, sometimes you realize you're not on the same team at all, because there's a darker version of this where your partner doesn't just keep score. They enjoy watching you lose. Our next storyteller finds out what it's like when someone laughs at your pain, but somehow cries every time you even think about leaving. Welcome back to the channel. Grab your favorite blanket, and let's dive into that one next, because karma really does come full circle. Story 8. She laughed when I cried, but cried when I left. So, this next one starts off so quietly toxic that you almost miss it. You know those relationships where the red flags don't show up as screaming fights, but as little jokes that somehow always land right on your soft spots? That's where OP found themselves. At first, their partner, we'll call her Jenna, seemed playful. If OP got teary during a sad movie, she'd nudge them and say, "Aw, you're such a baby," with a laugh. It felt harmless, almost cozy, like teasing at a late-night movie party. But slowly the jokes stopped being about movies and started being about OP's real feelings. If they came home from their apartment exhausted and stressed from work, she'd roll her eyes and say, "You're overreacting, it's not that deep. Just sleep it off." Arguments were the worst. OP would try to explain something simple, like, "It hurts when you cancel on me last minute," and Jenna would smirk. When OP's voice shook, she'd quietly pull out her phone. The first time OP saw the camera pointed at their red, blotchy face, they froze. Jenna laughed and said, "Relax, it's just for us. You're so dramatic, it's kinda cute." Later, during another disagreement, she'd replay that clip like a piece of evidence. "See, this is what I mean. You always blow things up. Look at you." That's the thing about gaslighting in these stories. It doesn't always show up as big speeches. Sometimes it's just a smirk, a recording, a sarcastic, "Are you seriously crying right now?" while soft music plays in the background like nothing's wrong. OP started to believe they were the problem. They apologized for crying. They apologized for feeling. But the moment OP tried to leave, whole different movie. The first time they said, "I think I need a break," Jenna's face snapped from stone cold to devastated. Tears. Actual sobbing. She slid down the kitchen cabinets like something out of a drama series, saying, "Please, you can't do this. I can't live without you." Suddenly she was listing all the ways she'd change, how she'd go to therapy, how she only joked because of her own trauma. And OP stayed. Because when someone is wailing in front of you, saying they're broken, and you're the only one who understands them, it's hard not to feel responsible. It's the opposite of that warm, fuzzy feeling of justice being served. It's a cold, heavy guilt sitting on your chest at 2 a.m. while you stare at the ceiling and try to convince yourself things will be different. Of course, the cycle repeated. When OP stayed, Jenna's tears dried up. The mocking crept back in like background vibrations. A snide comment here, a little recording there, a casual, "You'd be lost without me," tossed out over late night music. When OP pulled away, the waterworks returned on cue. Every attempt to set a boundary turned into a performance about how cruel OP was for abandoning her. The turning point wasn't a huge fight. It was a tiny, quiet moment. One night, after another argument where OP ended up crying and Jenna ended up filming, OP went to the bathroom, locked the door, and just stared at themselves in the mirror. Puffy eyes, shaking hands, that familiar pit in their stomach. And then they heard it through the thin wall. Jenna on the phone, voice perfectly calm, saying, "Don't worry, he's not going anywhere. I'll just cry tomorrow and he'll cave." That sentence snapped everything into focus, like someone turning up the brightness on the Minecraft world we've got running in the background. OP realized the tears were not a transformation. They were a tactic. The laughter when they cried, the crying when they left, it was all the same control, just in different costumes. Welcome back to the channel, by the way. Let's dive into what OP does with that realization in a minute, because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. And sometimes that's exactly when karma really does come full circle. Micro reset. Tears, guilt, and the fear of leaving. And sometimes that's exactly when karma really does come full circle. But here's the quiet, uncomfortable truth that a lot of these Reddit stories hint at. Even when you see the pattern, leaving isn't a clean movie moment. It's messy. It's stop and start. Most people don't walk out of a toxic apartment or relationship once. They walk out, get pulled back by tears and promises, and then have to crawl their way out again. If you've ever packed a bag or drafted the breakup text, only to end up sitting on the edge of the bed while they sobbed and said they couldn't live without you, that doesn't make you weak. That makes you human. When someone starts talking about hurting themselves, or they collapse into dramatic crying the second you touch the doorknob, your brain does this panicked calculation. You're not thinking revenge or justice. You're thinking, if I leave and something happens, is it my fault? Welcome back to the channel, by the way. If you're listening to this at night, maybe you've got Minecraft music softly in the background, and you're trying to help you drift off to sleep, but your nervous system still remembers those scenes. The late night arguments. The way your heart raced more from fear than from any cozy, warm, fuzzy feeling of justice being served. Here's the pattern they don't want you to see. Their emotions are real, but they are also their job. Someone can be genuinely distressed about losing control over you. They can cry real tears, shake, pace the apartment, send you long, panicked paragraphs. And at the exact same time, they can still be the person who mocked your feelings, isolated you from friends, or used money to keep you stuck. Their distress doesn't erase the harm they cause when you stay. It just resets the cycle. This is the mindbender moment, pattern interrupt time. What if you flip the script and imagine a relationship where your feelings got the same level of urgency? Imagine saying, "That joke hurt me," and instead of hearing, "You're too sensitive," you hear, "I'm sorry, tell me more." Imagine a partner or friend who doesn't treat your tears like an inconvenience or a weapon, but like information. Imagine a family dinner that feels like a comfortable little party, not a roast where you're always the punchline. And if your brain immediately goes, "Yeah, but I'd probably be overreacting. That's the gaslighting talking. Years of having your reactions minimized will do that. You're allowed to want a life where your boundaries are taken seriously, where you can grab your favorite blanket, curl up at night, and not brace yourself for the next emotional earthquake. Speaking of earthquakes, our next story shifts the scene from romance to relatives. Same control, different costume. It's about a toxic family member who insists they're just joking, but somehow their jokes always land right on the deepest cracks in your self-esteem. Let's dive into how OP finally stops laughing along and starts quietly documenting every joke until karma really does come full circle again. Story 9. The relative who turned my insecurities into a punchline. So, welcome back to the channel and grab your favorite blanket, because this one is a quieter kind of horror. No loud music, no neighbor's apartment vibrating at 5 a.m. Just a relative who learns how to tap on your insecurities like piano keys and calls it family fun. Let's dive into OP's story about the aunt who turned their self-esteem into a running gag. OP grew up with an Aunt Carol. At every holiday, every birthday party, she played the same role, the funny one. The one with the sharp one-liners, the little digs that made everyone laugh. When OP hit puberty and got acne, Aunt Carol greeted them at Thanksgiving with, "Wow, you brought extra stuffing. On your face." Everyone at the table laughed. OP laughed too, cheeks burning. Because what else do you do when the room is already on her side? It never stopped at appearance. When OP mentioned wanting to study art, Aunt Carol smirked and said, "Oh good, something to do while your smarter cousins get real jobs." If OP stumbled over a word, it was, "Careful, we don't want you to hurt the 3 brain cells you've got left." Each time OP tried to object, even gently, the script kicked in. "Oh, come on, don't be so sensitive. You know I love you. If I didn't joke with you, that's when you should worry." Over the years, those jokes became the main event at gatherings. OP would walk into a room and feel the mood shift, like everyone was waiting for the show to start. Aunt Carol would raise her voice just enough for the whole living room to hear. "Careful, everyone, OP's here. Hide your wallets. They picked an art major." Laughter. OP's dad chuckling, cousins snorting into their drinks. The TV humming low in the background like sad elevator music. OP felt themselves shrinking, one punchline at a time. Any attempt to set a boundary turned into cross-examination. OP tried once, quietly, in the kitchen, hands shaking over the sink. "Aunt Carol, those comments really hurt my feelings." Without missing a beat, she rolled her eyes. "Ungrateful. I've done nothing but support you. You can't even take a joke now? Kids these days." Suddenly, OP wasn't sure if they were being dramatic. Maybe it was their fault. Maybe they really were too sensitive. That's the trap a lot of toxic relationships use, especially in families. The abuse is wrapped in laughter and love, so you start doubting your right to be hurt. You're told to respect your elders, keep the peace, not ruin the night. Meanwhile, every little joke lands like a tiny hammer on the same cracked spot. The breaking point came at OP's college graduation dinner. They'd worked hard, pushed through anxiety, finally felt a bit proud. The whole family was there, the restaurant lights warm and dim, soft music drifting over the clink of silverware. OP's name was barely off the waiter's congratulations when Aunt Carol raised her glass. "To OP," she announced, "who proved us all wrong and actually finished something. Honestly, I thought you'd drop out the first time a pencil broke." The table exploded with laughter. OP saw the server glance over, saw a couple at the next table look away, uncomfortable. And something in OP just snapped. They didn't yell. They didn't throw a drink. They simply set their fork down, heart pounding, and said, clearly enough for the whole table, "That wasn't funny. It's never been funny. You've been making me the joke since I was 12, and I'm done pretending it doesn't hurt." Silence. No cozy chuckles this time. Aunt Carol blinked, already reaching for the old lines. "You're overreacting." OP cut her off, voice shaking but steady. "If you talk to me like that again, I will leave. And I won't come to these dinners anymore. I don't care if you call it a joke. I'm not your punchline." Then they leaned back quietly and let the discomfort sit. In that moment, the power imbalance cracked. A cousin muttered, "She's right." OP's mom shifted in her seat, suddenly seeing years of fun in a different light. Aunt Carol huffed, tried a week. "Wow, tough crowd tonight." But the spell was broken. The laughs didn't come. It wasn't some explosive revenge, but it was a different kind of justice. OP chose themselves over the performance, and sometimes that's the warm, fuzzy feeling of justice being served you need before you drift off to sleep. In the next story, we're going to move from family jokes to a partner who uses silence instead of sarcasm. Weaponized quiet that slowly rewires OP's reality until they start to wonder if they even exist when they're not being useful. When "it's just a joke" is actually emotional abuse. Weaponized quiet is sneaky because from the outside it just looks like nothing. No yelling, no slammed doors, just a heavy silence in the apartment that makes you tiptoe around your own life. And just like with jokes, people will tell you it can't be that bad because there's no obvious bruise to point at. Welcome back to the channel, and if you haven't already, grab your favorite blanket, let the Minecraft music and soft blocky landscapes kind of blur into the background, and let's dive into something that hides in a lot of families, the "it's just a joke" defense. Humor can be such a cozy way to connect. Inside jokes, silly nicknames, laughing so hard you cry at 2 a.m. on a summer night when nobody can sleep. That kind of teasing feels warm because both people feel seen and safe. But when someone keeps aiming their jokes right at the things you're insecure about, your weight, your job, your grades, your partner, and they see your face fall, hear your voice go small, and still double down, that's not harmless. That's someone telling you over and over what they really think, then hiding behind a laugh track. Abusers love jokes because they're like emotional camouflage. They get to test your boundaries. Can I call you stupid in front of everyone if I say it with a smile? Can I mock your depression at the family party and then act shocked when you don't want to visit anymore? If you speak up, they pull the emergency ripcord. Relax, you're too sensitive. And if other people laugh along, suddenly you're outnumbered. It's 3 people chuckling and 1 person shrinking. And guess who gets labeled the problem? Healthy teasing has consent baked in. You both know the bit, you both can tap out. If you say, "Hey, that actually hurt," the other person might look a little embarrassed, but they apologize, they adjust, and it doesn't quietly show up again next week. Toxic joking means you can never say, "That hurt me," without being punished, maybe with more jokes, maybe with that cold silence, maybe with a lecture about how you can't take anything. So as you're listening tonight, ask yourself, not out loud, just in that quiet space in your head, who do you feel lighter around? Which relationships leave you feeling comfortable and bigger, like you can stretch out on the couch and be weird, and which ones leave you feeling small and tightly folded, even though nobody ever raises their voice? Because in our next story, we're going to meet someone whose partner uses the same just joking routine, but adds a twist. Every punchline is about OP's success. Every sarcastic comment is a little sandbag tied to their ambition. It's still funny, of course, right up until karma really does come full circle. Story 10. The Partner Who Hated My Success. So, welcome back to the channel and grab your favorite blanket, because this next one is the kind of story that looks sweet on the outside and then quietly squeezes the air out of your lungs. When I met my ex, I had just enrolled in a part-time degree program. New campus, new routine, new possibilities. I'd go to class after work, come home buzzing with ideas, and he'd be on the couch in our apartment, music low, asking about my night. At first it felt so cozy. He'd make little jokes about dating a future genius, and he'd brag to his friends that his partner was going places. I really believed he was proud of me. The first shift was tiny. I came home with my first A on a big project, practically glowing, and instead of celebrating, he went quiet. Then he said, "Must be nice when you don't have a real job load like I do." It stung, but I brushed it off. Long day, right? Everyone gets irritable, but it kept happening. Anytime I shared good news, my professor praising my work, a coworker complimenting a presentation, being invited to a networking event, his face would tighten. He'd sigh, change the subject, or make a joke that landed like a slap. If I mentioned staying late at the library, he'd mutter, "Don't forget the people who were there before your fancy degree." The sabotage was never loud. That's what made it so confusing. Before my first big exam, he picked a fight about dishes in the sink and didn't speak to me the rest of the night. Before a class party I was excited about, he suddenly felt really insecure and asked if I was going to flirt with smarter people now. If I dressed up for a presentation, he'd say, "Wow, someone thinks they're important." Always with a little laugh, always just joking. Soon I started shrinking to keep the peace. I stopped talking about my grades. I turned down a study group because he pouted that I never had time anymore. I'd apologize for being busy even when I was just doing homework I'd warned him about all week. I'd sit on the couch next to him, textbooks closed, feeling this low, guilty thrum under my skin, like I was cheating on him with my own future. The breaking point came in the quietest way. One night, my advisor pulled me aside after class. She told me a professor had recommended me for a fully funded research position overseas for a year. Housing, stipend, the whole life-changing package. My first thought should have been awe or fear, or that warm, dizzy excitement. Instead, my stomach dropped and I thought, he is going to be furious. Not sad, not conflicted, furious. I walked back to our apartment with the offer letter in my bag, fingers shaking. I didn't feel the cool night air or hear the city sounds, or any of those cozy vibrations of a dream coming true. All I could hear was his future voice in my head, accusing me of abandoning him, of thinking I was better now. And as I put my key in the door, I had to decide, do I tell him, or do I pretend this opportunity never existed? Because in the next part of this story, you'll see what I chose, and how karma really does come full circle when someone tries to put a leash on your success. Micro reset, love that grows with you versus love that shrinks you. So here's the thing I wish someone had told me way earlier. Even good love can feel uncomfortable when you grow. Promotions, new hobbies, going back to school, finally sleeping through the night instead of doom scrolling in your apartment at 3 a.m. All of that shifts the balance. Healthy partners might get a little scared or insecure or thrown off by the new you, but after that first wobble, they lean in. They ask questions, they adjust. They try to meet you where you're going, not drag you back where you were. It's like when you're building in Minecraft and you suddenly decide, mid-structure, actually, this needs a whole second floor. The base creaks a bit, the vibes are off for a minute, but then you reinforce it, add better lighting, maybe some cozy music in the background. The build changes shape so it can hold more. Real love does that. It stretches, even if it complains a little while it's stretching. Toxic love, though, treats your growth like an insult. Your success becomes a personal attack, a kind of silent party they weren't invited to. You share good news, and instead of, "I'm proud of you," you get punishment. Maybe it's the cold shoulder. Maybe they forget important dates, or suddenly pick a fight the night before your big presentation so you don't sleep. Maybe they joke that your new friends are too good for people like us, and you're left shrinking yourself to make them comfortable. There's a sneaky version of this that shows up in a lot of Reddit stories. The partner or friend who only loves you when you're small. When you're struggling, they're all support and sympathy. The second you start doing better, they get competitive, critical, or weirdly distant. It's like they only signed up for the sad playlist version of you, not the remix where you're actually healing. So, quiet check-in moment while you grab your favorite blanket and settle in. Do the people closest to you cheer when you level up, or do they subtly punish you for it? Not with dramatic speeches, but with little digs, withdrawn affection, or jokes about you thinking you're better than everyone. If you feel like you have to dim your wins, or talk less about what makes you proud just to keep the peace, that's not you being humble. That's you being managed, and it's okay to be scared of outgrowing people you care about. That fear is real. But locking yourself into version 1.0 so someone else doesn't have to face their own insecurities, that's not sustainable. Eventually, the part of you that wants more starts rattling the cage, sending little emotional vibrations through your life until you either expand or break. Welcome back to the channel, by the way. This is exactly why we read these cozy, slightly painful stories together. They help you drift off to sleep while quietly reminding you that the warm, fuzzy feeling of justice being served sometimes starts the moment you stop apologizing for growing. Because in the next story, we're going from subtle sabotage to a partner who doesn't even bother hiding it. He flat out tells her, no one else will ever love you, like he's some kind of final boss of affection. And Reddit, very calmly and collectively, proves him spectacularly wrong. Let's dive into how karma really does come full circle when someone tries to make themselves the ceiling on your life. Story 11. No one else will ever love you. Until Reddit did so. Welcome back to the channel and grab your favorite blanket, because this one feels less like revenge and more like an escape mission. It starts quietly, the way a lot of toxic stories do, with someone who seems almost too attentive at first. OP meets this guy through friends, and at the beginning he's all soft music, cozy nights in, and, "You're so beautiful, I can't believe you're with me." It feels comfortable, safe. Then, slowly, the comments start to twist. He'll look her up and down before a party and go, "Wow, that dress really shows everything. But I guess it's the best you can do with your body type." He laughs, kisses her forehead, and adds, "You're lucky I put up with you." At first she files it under bad jokes. Everyone has off days, right? But the pattern locks in. She mispronounces a word and he tells her she's cute when she tries to sound smart. She forgets something at the apartment and he sighs like a disappointed teacher, reminding her that she'd lose her own head if it wasn't attached. Every sting is followed by that same line. "You're lucky I put up with you. You know that? No one else would." Over months, it escalates from little digs to a full script. He tells her she's too emotional, too broken from her childhood, too difficult. He says, very calmly over takeout one night, that other guys want easy girlfriends, not projects. He repeats that she's not pretty enough, not thin enough, not smart enough, and that any other man would have left already. The apartment starts to feel less like home and more like a courtroom where she's always on trial. And the scary part is, she starts to believe him. That's how this stuff works. It's like emotional sleep deprivation. Constant, low-level vibrations against your self-worth until you're too tired to fight. She stops seeing friends because he says they're a bad influence. She doesn't apply for a promotion because he says she'd embarrass herself. She stays because the story in her head is now his voice. No one else will ever love you. One night, after another round of, "You're lucky I put up with you," she ends up scrolling in bed while he snores beside her. She stumbles onto r/relationships, then r/abusive relationships. The titles look uncomfortably familiar. On a shaky impulse, she makes a throwaway account and types out her story, framing it as, "Am I overreacting? How do I be a better girlfriend so he's not so frustrated?" She genuinely expects Reddit to tell her she's the problem. Instead, she wakes up to hundreds of comments. People calmly, firmly call it what it is. Verbal abuse, emotional manipulation, isolation. Strangers point out the pattern, how he tears her down, then sells himself as the only buyer. They say things like, "You sound kind, thoughtful, and funny. You are not hard to love. He is making you feel that way so you won't leave." It's a pattern interrupt in real life. For the first time, the narrative in her head has competition. She screenshots comments, rereads them on the bus, in the bathroom at work, whenever his voice gets loud. The warm, fuzzy feeling of justice being served isn't about him getting punished yet. It's about her realizing he isn't the judge of her value. Karma really does come full circle here, because the control he thought he had starts leaking away to a bunch of internet strangers with usernames like Sleepy Creeper and Minecraft Therapist. And in the next part, we'll talk about what happens when she finally believes them more than she believes him. Community as a mirror, seeing toxicity through other eyes. When she finally believes them more than she believes him, something really important happens. The spell breaks a little. Not all at once, not like a movie scene with dramatic music, but like when you slowly realize the background noise in your apartment has been a fan you could have turned off this whole time. That's where community comes in, those outside voices that quietly say, "Hey, this isn't normal," until you can hear your own thoughts again. Abusers know how powerful that is. which is why they work so hard to cut it off. It's not always the obvious stuff like, you can't see your friends, or your family is toxic, block them. Sometimes it's softer, sneakier. Your friends don't really get us. Therapists just tell you what you want to hear. People on Reddit are dramatic. Our relationship is actually pretty cozy compared to theirs. Bit by bit, they don't just isolate you physically, they fence off your mind. They convince you that what you're living through is normal, or worse, that you somehow deserve it. That's why a random late-night post can feel like revenge against that whole system. You sit there at 2 a.m., maybe Minecraft music on in the background, maybe this video playing to help you drift off to sleep, and you type out your story under a throwaway name. You half expect people to say, "Yeah, you're overreacting." Instead, you get a wall of calm, firm comments. "This is not okay. This is abuse. This is not your fault." The relief in those moments is huge. It's like opening a window in a stuffy room and realizing everyone else has been breathing fresh air this whole time. A lot of folks in these stories say the same thing. They didn't recognize the gaslighting, the financial control, the constant little jokes about their insecurities until strangers reflected it back to them. And I know, welcome back to the channel where we let internet comments be the voice of reason. Sounds mildly ironic. But sometimes that chorus of, "No, you're not crazy," is the first solid ground someone's had in years. If you're listening tonight and some of this feels uncomfortably familiar, consider this your gentle nudge. You don't have to make any big, dramatic moves. You can just reach out, message a trusted friend, call or text a hotline. Find a supportive online space where the goal isn't drama, but reflection and validation. Reddit or channels like this aren't a substitute for professional help, but they can be a first step toward realizing you're not alone and you're not imagining things. And toxicity doesn't stop at romance either. In the next story, we're moving from partners to friends, the kind who cheer for you when you're struggling, but get weirdly competitive the second you start to do well. So grab your favorite blanket, settle in, and let's dive into a friendship where support slowly turns into a one-sided competition, and karma really does come full circle again. Story 12, the friend who couldn't stand my happiness. So, this next one isn't about a screaming boss or a nightmare landlord. It's about something a little quieter and honestly, a little sadder. The friend who loved me most when I was miserable. The kind of friendship that feels cozy at first, like late night talks and shared snacks, until you realize the warmth only exists when you're both stuck in the same cold place. Welcome back to the channel, and let's dive into Story 12, the friend who couldn't stand my happiness. For years, it was me and Kayla against the world. We bonded over everything going wrong. Bad jobs with managers who thought work-life balance was a myth. Bad dates that ended with us eating cereal on my apartment floor at midnight. That heavy feeling of being permanently behind while everyone else was at some invisible party called adulthood. We'd put on soft music, complain, laugh, and there was this unspoken rule. As long as we were both struggling, we were okay. But life, thankfully, doesn't always stay stuck. Slowly, things started to shift for me. I got into therapy, and my mental health, which had been a constant low buzz of anxiety, started to level out. I landed a promotion at work that actually paid a living wage. And I met someone kind, steady, and boring in the best way, who didn't treat relationships like a revenge game or a competition. At first, I thought Kayla would be thrilled. She said all the right words. "I'm so happy for you. You deserve this." But the vibrations underneath were off. When I told her about my promotion, she laughed and said, "Must be nice when your boss actually likes you." Then followed it up with a story about a time I cried in the break room so I wouldn't get a big head. Anytime I shared a win, she'd either minimize it or drag out some old embarrassing memory. New relationship going well, she'd say, "Remember when you ugly cried over that guy who ghosted you after 2 dates? Improved sleep and less anxiety? Wow, you're basically a different person. Hope you don't forget where you came from." It was framed as jokes, but the punchline was always me. I started editing myself around her. If my boyfriend did something sweet, I left it out. If work went well, I just said, "It's fine." I noticed I could rant for hours and she was engaged, but the second I sounded genuinely happy, her eyes went flat. It felt like I had to choose between being honest about my life or keeping the friendship comfortable. The breaking point came with a huge opportunity at work. My manager asked if I'd be interested in leading a small project, something that could open doors later. I was nervous but excited, and like I'd always done, I told Kayla first. She smiled, then casually mentioned knowing someone on my team and jokingly told them I was already overwhelmed and probably shouldn't be given more responsibility. I found out when my manager pulled me aside and said, "If you're not ready, we can give this to someone else." My stomach dropped. That night, when I confronted Kayla, she rolled her eyes and said, "Relax, it was just a joke. You're so sensitive now that your life is perfect." That was the moment it clicked. She wasn't just uncomfortable with my happiness. She was actively trying to pull me back down to where she felt safe. And the way I finally responded to that, well, that's where things get interesting. Micro reset, outgrowing friendships without hating yourself. So when I say that was the moment it clicked, I mean it felt like someone quietly flipped on the light in a dim apartment. Nothing physically changed, but suddenly I could see the mess I'd been sitting in. And if you've ever had that realization about a friend, not a partner, it can feel extra weird because we're told friendships are supposed to be the safe, cozy relationships that last forever. But here's the thing. Nobody really prepares you for. You're going to outgrow some friendships, especially the ones built around shared pain, late-night rant sessions, and staying stuck together. At first it feels comfortable, like familiar music at a small party. Then one day you notice the playlist hasn't changed in years, and every conversation pulls you backward, when your life is finally moving forward. That's where the guilt sneaks in. You think, they were there when I cried over my ex, when my family drama was at its worst. I owe them. And that guilt can keep you in a draining friendship long after the warmth is gone. It's like feeling obligated to keep visiting an apartment you no longer live in, just because you once hid there during a storm. If you're listening to this at night, maybe with Minecraft blocks stacking quietly in the background, grab your favorite blanket for a second and just check in with yourself. When you spend time with this person, do you feel energized or exhausted afterward? Can you share good news freely, or do you catch yourself shrinking it down so they don't get weird, jealous, or suddenly jokey about your success? That simple question, do I feel lighter or heavier after we talk, can tell you more than any long list of red flags. You don't need a dramatic blow-up to honor that answer. You're allowed to create distance in small, gentle ways. Fewer late-night calls, slower replies, clearer boundaries about what you will and won't drop everything for. It doesn't have to be revenge. Sometimes the warm, fuzzy feeling of justice being served is just you quietly choosing peace. I know, part of you might want a big cinematic confrontation scene, but most real-life micro-resets are quieter. You let the friendship breathe. You stop volunteering information that always gets used against you. You stop auditioning for a role in someone's life that never actually fits. And karma really does come full circle here, because as you step back from those draining dynamics, you make space for people who can celebrate your growth instead of competing with it. Now, that's the gentle version of control. In the next story, things aren't nearly so subtle. We're going to shift from a friend who resents your happiness to a partner who says they're checking your phone for your own safety, but somehow always knows exactly where you are, who you text, and what you're doing every single night. Let's dive into that one, because the way Reddit handled it might just help you drift off to sleep, feeling a little more prepared. Story 13. Let me check your phone, I'm just worried. So, welcome back to the channel and grab your favorite blanket, because this one looks soft on the outside, but it has some pretty sharp edges once we get into it. Our next Reddit storyteller thought they'd finally found someone gentle after a string of bad dates. Someone who understood hurt and promised they'd never cause it. Their partner's big backstory was that they'd been cheated on. Not just once, but in this dramatic, movie-style way they brought up every few days. Late night talks, soft music in the background, and they'd say, "I just have trust issues now. I need a little extra reassurance." At first that sounded reasonable. You can almost hear yourself saying, "Sure, I get it, I'll help you feel safe." The first compromise was tiny. They were on the couch, scrolling, and they said, half laughing. "Here, you can look through my phone anytime. I've got nothing to hide." Then they added, "Can I see yours? It'll make me feel better." It felt like intimacy, like that cozy moment where you're both in the same little digital apartment, swapping memes and reading messages together. They started sharing passwords, just in case of an emergency. They'd read messages out loud, lean on each other's shoulders, and it almost looked cute from the outside. But slowly, it stopped being two-way. OP realized they never actually went through their partner's phone. Meanwhile, the partner would casually pick up OP's, open it without asking, and start scrolling while saying, "I'm just anxious, you know why." Then the policing kicked in. Every contact became a potential threat. "Who's this? Why did she text you at night? Why did you say LOL here? What was so funny?" If OP hesitated even a second before handing over the phone, it turned into a full interrogation. "Why are you hiding things? You know what I've been through." It wasn't reassurance anymore. It was a courtroom, and OP was always on trial. To keep the peace, OP started changing. They deleted harmless messages because they knew a joke from a coworker could start a 3-hour fight. They stopped replying to old friends, especially anyone the partner had labeled as disrespectful for existing. Their world got smaller and smaller, and even going out felt like a risk. Karma really does come full circle, but in the middle of it, you just feel trapped. The breaking point came one night when OP woke up to that weird, wrong kind of quiet. No party outside, no traffic, just the soft glow of their own phone screen. Their partner was sitting on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, scrolling with this intense focus. OP realized the phone had been moved from the charger across the room. Notifications were already opened. Location services had been changed. There was a new tracking app installed, tucked into a random folder. When confronted, the partner didn't apologize. They doubled down. If you weren't doing anything, you wouldn't care. And that's the moment Reddit really latched onto. The line between "I'm worried" and "I own you" snapping in half. In the next story, we're going to look at what happens when that same fear of being alone turns into financial control instead of digital surveillance, and how one OP quietly documented everything until they got that warm, fuzzy feeling of justice being served. Privacy, trust, and the myth of nothing to hide. That, if you weren't doing anything wrong, you wouldn't care. Line is like the greatest hits album of manipulators. It sounds logical for about half a second, and then your stomach drops, because you realize what they're really saying is, your boundaries only matter if I approve of them. So, welcome back to the channel and grab your favorite blanket, because this is where we slow things down and talk about privacy, trust, and that myth of having nothing to hide. First thing to untangle, privacy is not the same as secrecy. Secrecy is, I'm hiding something that directly affects you. Privacy is, I'm still a whole person, even when I'm in a relationship. You're allowed to have a journal no one reads, a Spotify playlist you never share, a quiet late-night walk where you just listen to the music of your own thoughts. That little bubble of personal space is what keeps you feeling like you, instead of feeling like an accessory living in someone else's apartment. But in a lot of these Reddit stories, you see the same pattern. A partner says, if we really love each other, we shouldn't have any walls between us. And suddenly, no walls means full access to your phone, your passwords, your DMs, your bank accounts, your location 24/7. They frame it like the ultimate romantic gesture, when really it's a security system built for their anxiety. The demand isn't, let's build trust, it's, prove to me every day that you're not betraying me. That's not love, that's unpaid emotional IT support. A lot of those demands come from fear. Fear of being cheated on, fear of being abandoned, fear of feeling stupid, and fear by itself is human. What turns it toxic is when someone decides the solution to their fear is controlling you. Instead of saying, hey, I feel insecure when you're texting late at night. Can we talk about it? They say, give me your phone right now, or you must be cheating. One of those options invites connection. The other turns your relationship into a permanent security check at the airport. Healthier alternatives do exist, even if they're less dramatic than a full device strip search. Some couples agree on basic phone boundaries. Phones face down at dinner. No reading each other's messages without asking. No using Find My like a private investigator unless there's an actual safety concern. They talk openly about what makes them spiral, maybe an ex who lied or parents who snooped, and they let trust grow slowly instead of trying to speedrun it in a single night. And here's the part I really want you to hear, especially if someone has guilt-tripped you with that nothing to hide line. Wanting privacy doesn't mean you're hiding something. It means you're human. You get to have inner thoughts. You get to vent to a friend. You get to feel comfortable in your own digital space without rehearsing how it would look if someone scrolled through it. Needing that space isn't a red flag. Ignoring it is. Because the truly scary partners aren't always the ones who yell and demand passwords. Sometimes the control is quieter. No shouting, no slammed doors, just long, heavy silences. Affection switched off like a light, and attention withheld until you behave again. In the next story, we're going to drift into that territory. A partner who never raised their voice, but used silence like a weapon, night after night, until karma really does come full circle and OP finally gets that warm, fuzzy feeling of justice being served. So, let's dive into that one next and let it help you drift off to sleep, even as we keep shining a soft little flashlight on those subtle red flags. Story 14. The silent treatment that lasted for weeks. So, we've talked about loud, obvious toxicity. Now I want you to imagine the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't slam doors or blast music, but still keeps you up at night, replaying every word. This is the story of a partner who never raised their voice, but somehow managed to make silence feel like an earthquake in a tiny apartment. OP describes their partner as the calm one. You know the type. He'd brag to friends, almost proudly, that he never yelled, never got dramatic, never started a fight. He'd say things like, "Other couples are always screaming, but we're so rational." On paper, that sounds cozy and healthy. It sounds like the kind of relationship that should help you drift off to sleep, not the kind that makes you stare at the ceiling, counting all the ways a conversation went wrong. But here's where it twists. Whenever a conflict came up, OP saying, "Hey, it really hurt me when you joked about my job," or setting a tiny boundary like, "Please don't check my phone." He wouldn't argue. He wouldn't even sigh. He would just shut off. No texts, no eye contact. Walking past OP in their own home like they were a stranger at a crowded party. At first it would last a few hours, then a day. Then, sometimes, entire weeks of this cold, echoing quiet. They'd sit on opposite ends of the couch, the only sound the low hum of background music or the game on TV, and still no acknowledgement. He'd eat the food OP cooked without saying thank you, leave his dishes in the sink, and move around the apartment like OP was a ghost. OP started to break under it. They'd over-apologize for things they weren't even sure they'd done. They'd scroll through old messages, replaying every line of every conversation, trying to find the exact sentence that flipped the switch. They'd send long, emotional texts from the next room, promising to do better, begging for just a little eye contact, a little warmth, any sign that the connection wasn't completely gone. And slowly, the pattern became clear. Certain topics, money, his jealousy, OP wanting a night out with friends, always led to being frozen out. The silent treatment turned into a training tool. Like a shock collar with no visible marks, it taught OP which boundaries were dangerous. They started avoiding those subjects entirely, thinking, if I just don't bring it up, we'll have peace. If I stay small and agreeable, maybe he'll stay calm. That's the really creepy part. On the surface, there was no yelling, no obvious revenge, no dramatic scenes. He could always say, "I never abused you. I never even raised my voice." But OP realized that the only time the relationship felt comfortable was when they had no needs, no opinions, and no complaints. Their silence bought his attention. One night, lying awake next to this calm partner who hadn't spoken to them in 5 days, OP finally had the thought that changed everything. If I have to disappear to keep the peace, is there really any peace at all? And the moment they decided to test that question out loud, everything shifted in a way he did not see coming. Micro reset. Quiet abuse, loud impact. When OP finally broke that 5-day silence, it wasn't some dramatic movie scene. There were no smashed plates, no screaming, no neighbors banging on the apartment walls. It was just one small sentence in a very quiet room. And honestly, that's how a lot of abuse actually looks. We talk about toxic relationships like they're always loud music and wild parties and doors slamming at midnight, but so many of the worst stories are almost socially acceptable on the surface. No one's throwing punches, no one's yelling. They're just joking, just needing space, just being honest. Those tiny, constant vibrations of disrespect don't look dramatic from the outside, but they shake your sense of self over time. Think about stuff like the prolonged silent treatment, not the "I need an hour to cool down" kind. That can be healthy. I mean days of icy quiet used like a weapon. Or that chronic sarcasm where every conversation turns into a dig, a joke about your weight, your job, your friends, followed by, "Relax, you're so sensitive." Constant criticism disguised as helping you improve, but somehow you're the only one who ever needs improving. When someone uses those behaviors to control you, punish you, or keep you walking on eggshells, that is emotional abuse. Even if they've never laid a hand on you. Even if they've never raised their voice, you don't need bruises for the damage to be real. So if you've ever caught yourself thinking, "They never hit me," or "They never yelled, so it can't be that bad," I want you to hear this clearly, almost like the calm music under this video. Your pain is still valid. Your confusion makes sense. Most people in toxic relationships don't recognize it at first because the behavior escalates slowly. It creeps in one joke, one guilt trip, one silent night at a time. Here's a little pattern interrupt for your brain tonight. Instead of replaying what they said, try noticing how you feel in your own body around them. Do your shoulders inch up toward your ears the second you hear their key in the door? Does your stomach drop when your phone lights up with their name? Do you spend the whole night mentally rehearsing every sentence so you don't set them off, even though they swear they're the calm one? That tension, that constant anxiety, that sense of walking through your own home like it's a minefield, that's data. Your body often figures it out before your mind does. You deserve to feel comfortable in your own bed, not like you're prepping for cross-examination every time you roll over. So as you grab your favorite blanket and let the Minecraft blocks stack up in the background, I want you to keep that body check in mind for our next story. Because the next OP also told themselves, "It's not that bad, they've never actually hit me." Right up until the night their chest felt so tight they couldn't ignore it anymore. That was their breaking point, the moment they decided to leave, even though the fear and guilt were screaming at them to stay. And the way they planned their quiet escape? Let's dive into how karma really does come full circle when someone finally decides enough is enough. Story 15. The night I finally packed my bags. So, welcome back to the channel and grab your favorite blanket, because this next one is one of those stories that starts with 100 tiny paper cuts before you ever see the knife. I didn't wake up one night and suddenly realize, oh, this is toxic. It was more like a slow leak in a tire. You don't notice it until you're riding on the rim. In the beginning, he was all music and flowers and late night talks that went on until the sky turned that soft gray. He'd stay over at my apartment and say things like, "I've never felt this safe with anyone." Then, little by little, the compliments started coming with conditions. "You look beautiful when you wear your hair the way I like. I'm so proud of you, as long as you don't get too full of yourself." Every boundary I tried to set became a debate. If I wanted a quiet night, he wanted a party. If I asked him not to go through my phone, he'd say, "If you're not hiding anything, why do you care?" There were broken promises stacked in the corner like dirty laundry. He'd swear he'd stop joking about my weight, then do it in front of friends. He'd promise to pay his half of the bills, then somehow forget, until I covered it. I was always just a little bit off balance, a little bit guilty, a little bit tired. And honestly, I told myself it wasn't that bad because he'd never hit me. The final straw was stupidly small on the surface, which is how you know the damage was deep. We were at his friend's birthday party, music thumping, lights low, everyone a couple drinks in. I mentioned I might go back to school, just casually. He laughed. Not a cute laugh, a sharp, mean one that cut through the room. Loud enough for everyone to hear, he said, "School? Babe, you can't even manage your own life. Who's going to want you on their team?" People laughed awkwardly. I felt my face burn. And in that moment, with the vibrations of the bass in my chest and all those eyes on me, I realized he wasn't joking. He believed it. He wanted me small. I didn't leave that night. It took a week of my chest feeling tight, of replaying that sentence in the dark while I tried to sleep. During the day, I got practical. I opened a new bank account on my lunch break and started sliding over tiny amounts of money. I texted an old friend I'd slowly drifted from because he didn't like her vibe and asked very quietly if her couch was still available in emergencies. I found my old duffel bag and pushed it to the back of my closet, then started tucking in essentials one by one, an extra toothbrush, copies of documents, a change of clothes. The night I finally packed my bags for real, he was out with coworkers. He told me I was too sensitive for their jokes, so I wouldn't have fun anyway. That was my window. I turned off the TV, and the apartment went strangely silent. No music, no commentary, just my own heartbeat in my ears. Folding clothes felt surreal. My hands shook so badly, I dropped a stack of shirts. I kept hearing his voice in my head. "No one else will put up with you. You're lucky I'm still here." I almost stopped. I almost convinced myself to wait until after the holidays, after his big work thing, after something. That's the trap, by the way. There's always another reason to wait. I called my friend and whispered, even though I was alone, "I'm coming tonight. Is that okay?" She didn't hesitate. "Door's unlocked. Just come." That simple sentence felt more loving than anything he'd said in months. When I picked up the duffel, it felt heavier than it should have, like it was full of every argument, every apology I'd made for things that weren't my fault. I walked down the hallway, half expecting him to appear, to block the door, to start the crying and promising routine. My palms were sweaty on the doorknob. I paused there, hearing every past guilt trip echoing in my head. Then I opened it. The hallway was just quiet. No dramatic music, no cinematic confrontation. I stepped out, pulled the door closed behind me, and listened to the soft click of the lock. That tiny sound felt like a chapter ending. In the car, my hands were still shaking so hard I had to sit for a minute before turning the key. I was terrified. My whole life was suddenly one big blank page. But underneath the fear was this strange, almost guilty lightness, like taking off a backpack you'd forgotten you were wearing. I drove to my friend's place with my heart in my throat, half expecting my phone to explode with messages. It stayed dark. When I stepped into her apartment and she wrapped me in a hug without asking for explanations, it hit me. I wasn't lucky he'd stayed. He'd been lucky I did. And as I sank onto her couch, listening to the soft hum of her fridge instead of his criticism, I felt the first tiny, cozy hint of that warm, fuzzy feeling of justice being served, not by some big revenge plot, but by finally choosing myself. And the wild thing is, that quiet little exit, that was the moment karma really does come full circle, even if it didn't look dramatic from the outside. Because the next part of this story is all about what happens when you start rebuilding from the ground up, one small boundary at a time, and how leaving isn't the end, it's the beginning. Let's dive into that in the next section and help you drift off to sleep, knowing that walking away can be the most powerful move you ever make. Leaving isn't a moment, it's a process. Leaving isn't usually one dramatic door slam in the middle of the night. It's more like 100 tiny moments that stack up quietly, until one day, you realize you're already halfway gone in your head. So as we keep floating along with this cozy Minecraft world, and the music hums in the background, I want you to hear this clearly. If you're not out yet, that doesn't mean you failed. Most people who finally walk out of a toxic apartment, house, or relationship have been leaving for a long time already. It starts with those little doubts. The way your stomach drops when their name pops up on your phone, the way a joke about your insecurities lingers in your chest long after the party is over. Maybe you catch yourself rewriting memories because of gaslighting, or noticing that every sweet gesture somehow comes with a price tag attached. Those are the internal shifts. Tiny acts of defiance follow, saving screenshots, telling a friend the truth, not apologizing when you didn't actually do anything wrong. And then there's the part almost no one talks about, going back, over and over. You leave for a weekend or for a night, you swear you're done, and then you return. They cry, they love bomb, they promise therapy. They say no one else will ever love you like they do. You believe them, or you just feel too tired to fight. I know it can feel like you're weak because you didn't stick the landing the first time. But those returns are part of the process. Every cycle teaches you something. Every time you go back, the mask slips a little more, and the warm, fuzzy feeling of justice being served starts to come not from revenge, but from finally seeing them clearly. For some people, especially when things are more dangerous, leaving isn't just emotional, it's strategic. Safety planning is its own kind of courage. Quietly stashing documents, memorizing important numbers, opening a secret bank account, or waiting until you know where you can sleep that first night. It may look like doing nothing from the outside, but it's actually you building a bridge out one plank at a time. That's not cowardice. That's survival. So if you're lying here right now, maybe in a dark room, Minecraft blocks gently stacking on screen to help you drift off to sleep, and you're thinking, I'm not ready to leave. Be gentle with yourself. You don't have to force a big cinematic exit tonight. Just start paying attention. Notice how your body feels when you're around them. Notice how much sleep you lose, how much smaller you feel, how often you apologize for existing. Awareness is the first boundary. And hey, welcome back to the channel if you've heard me say this before. Karma really does come full circle, but sometimes it starts with you choosing yourself. Grab your favorite blanket, because in the next story, we're moving past the leaving itself and into what comes after. The awkward, quiet, sometimes lonely nights where you're learning who you are without them, and how those shaky first boundaries slowly turn into a life that actually feels comfortable and like it belongs to you. Story 16, Learning to Say No After Years of Yes. So, welcome back to the channel, because this next one picks up in that weird quiet after the storm. OP describes walking out of their toxic relationship, signing the last paper, handing over the keys, and then nothing. No angry texts, no tracking their location, no late night music thumping through the apartment walls while someone interrogates them about where they've been. Just a quiet, almost echoey kind of silence that should feel cozy, but mostly feels like standing on a stage after the party ended hours ago. They say the first few nights were the strangest. They'd reach for their phone automatically at 11 p.m., bracing for the usual wall of accusations or guilt trips. And there would be a weather alert, a meme from a coworker, a sale notification. Their brain, so used to chaos, kept waiting for the vibrations of drama that never came. And that's the thing about leaving. Everyone talks about the big, dramatic escape, but not about the disorienting emptiness that follows when you've built your whole routine around surviving someone else's moods. Let's dive into what happened when OP tried to live like a normal person again. The first boundary was tiny on paper. A new coworker asked if OP could help them move, on OP's only day off, after a week of overtime. Old OP would have said yes before the sentence even finished. New OP typed, I'm really tired, so I need that day to rest. I can't help this time. Then they stared at the screen like they'd just committed a crime. They hit send, instant heart pounding, sweaty hands, that familiar voice in their head whispering, You're selfish. They'll be mad. You're a bad friend. They almost followed up with 3 apologetic texts and an offer to bring snacks, just to soften the no, but they didn't. They put the phone face down, turned on some soft music to help them drift off to sleep, and waited for the explosion. It never came. The coworker replied, No worries, totally get it. And OP had this surreal moment of, wait, that's allowed, saying no and not having to pay for it later. That tiny, ordinary interaction felt like a warm, fuzzy feeling of justice being served, not against some cartoon villain, but against all the lies their ex had drilled into them about how no one else would ever tolerate their needs. Of course, not everyone reacted so well. A different friend texted at midnight asking OP to talk right now about their latest breakup. Old pattern, OP would stay up all night, listening, comforting, ignoring their own 6 a.m. shift. This time, OP replied, "I'm about to sleep. Can we talk tomorrow?" The friend pushed back. "Wow, you've changed. You used to be there for me." That old panic flared, but OP held the line. Phone on, do not disturb. No late night call. No emergency that magically became OP's responsibility. Over the next few weeks, the boundaries got a little bigger. Leaving a conversation when someone started joking about their insecurities and then calling them oversensitive. Telling a family member, "I don't want to talk about my ex," and not filling the silence with nervous laughter. Asking a new date to slow things down when the love bombing started to feel a little too familiar. Each time, the same cycle. Say no, feel selfish, wait for punishment, and then notice who respected it and who tried to argue their way back into control. What OP realized, slowly, was that every no was a tiny piece of revenge against that old version of themselves, who believed they had to earn basic kindness. Every time they chose a quiet night in over someone else's drama, every time they didn't over-explain or apologize 10 times, it was like telling their past, "You deserved better the whole time." Karma really does come full circle, but sometimes it circles inside you first, reshaping what you'll accept. And just when OP started to feel a little steadier, a little more comfortable in this new life built on shaky yeses and brave nos, someone from their past decided to test those fresh boundaries in a way they absolutely weren't ready for. Micro reset. Boundaries as self-respect, not punishment. So when that person from their past came knocking, here's the thing OP had to remember. Boundaries aren't a punishment. They're not some silent treatment in a fancy outfit. They're just you quietly deciding, this is what gets to live in my life, and this is what doesn't. It's less like building a brick wall and more like finally putting a cozy little fence around your favorite garden so people stop stomping through it at 3 a.m. like it's their personal party. A lot of us are taught the opposite. We're told that saying no is mean, that asking for space is overreacting, and that if someone gets upset, you must have done something wrong. But boundaries aren't about controlling other people's behavior. You can't make them be kind, respectful, or honest. You can only decide what you'll do when they're not. Do you stay on the phone while they yell? Do you keep going to the jokes at your expense dinners? Or do you quietly step back and go home to your own comfortable apartment and your own peace? Here's where it gets tricky and where so many Reddit stories line up. The people who benefited from you having no boundaries are usually the loudest complainers when you finally set one. The friend who always forgets their wallet will suddenly call you selfish. The partner who checks your phone for your safety will act betrayed when you put a passcode on it. Their bad reaction doesn't mean your line is wrong. It just means the free ride ended. Karma really does come full circle, but sometimes it arrives in the form of you canceling plans. If that feels huge, start small. You don't have to overhaul your entire life tonight. Maybe just notice one area where you feel consistently drained or disrespected. The coworker who messages you about work at midnight. The relative who jokes about your weight every holiday. Pick one and experiment with a gentle limit. I don't answer work messages after 7 p.m. Or, if you keep commenting on my body, I'm going to step outside. That's it. No dramatic music, no big revenge speech. Just a calm line in the sand. And yes, it will probably feel uncomfortable at first. Your heart might race. Your voice might shake. That doesn't mean you're in danger. It usually means you're breaking a long, old habit of abandoning yourself. Discomfort is often the vibrations of growth, not a warning siren. Think of it like starting a new Minecraft world. It's awkward, you punch a few trees badly, but eventually you're building something safe that actually protects you at night. So as you grab your favorite blanket and let the music and blocky landscapes help you drift off to sleep, keep this in mind. Boundaries are self-respect in action. And in our next story, you're going to hear from someone who had to relearn that from scratch, rebuilding trust after a toxic relationship, and trying to date again without repeating the same painful script, only to discover their new perfect partner had a very familiar pattern hiding just under the surface. Let's dive into how they handled it this time. Story 17. Dating again without repeating the same mistakes. So, welcome back to the channel and grab your favorite blanket, because this next one is for anyone who's ever looked at the dating pool after a toxic breakup and thought, yeah, I might just become a hermit instead. OP says leaving their last relationship felt less like a breakup and more like evacuating a collapsing apartment in the middle of the night. For months afterward, they didn't just avoid dating apps, they avoided eye contact. At the grocery store, at work, anywhere. They weren't just scared of getting hurt again, they were scared of themselves. Scared they'd miss the same signs, fall for the same music of sweet words and big promises, and then wake up back in that old, familiar nightmare. But the flip side was just as scary. What if they became so guarded that nobody ever got in at all? Eventually, on one of those quiet night walks where the air feels soft and the world finally stops buzzing, OP realized that healing wasn't supposed to be a permanent no-entry sign. It was supposed to be a better filter. So they dipped a toe back in. One carefully curated profile. No late-night trauma dumping. No, maybe I can fix them energy. Just, here I am, working on myself, looking for something calm, kind, and, honestly, a little boring in the best way. Right away, the old patterns tried to sneak back in. Date number 1 sent good morning and good night texts after a single coffee. The attention felt cozy, almost like a warm drink, but there was that familiar pressure underneath. By day 3, they were joking about how OP better not ghost, because they were already invested. OP's stomach did that tiny drop, not a jump scare. Just a quiet, low vibration of unease. Past OP would have laughed it off, blamed their own anxiety, and stayed. This version paused. They remembered how love bombing had felt last time. The constant messages, the surprise visits, the way "I just care so much" slowly turned into "I need to know where you are at all times." So they listened to that discomfort and ended it kindly but firmly. No revenge, no dramatic party exit, just, "This pace doesn't feel comfortable for me." It became a pattern in a different way. Another date joked about OP's therapy, calling it emotional training wheels. Someone else made little digs about how often OP saw friends, then pouted when OP wouldn't cancel plans. Each time there was that tiny inner negotiation. Maybe they're just awkward, maybe I'm too sensitive, maybe I should give it more time. And each time, OP chose themselves instead, walking away before the jokes turned into gaslighting or the cute jealousy became isolation. Then they met the person who broke the pattern by not trying to break them. This one showed up on time, didn't complain when OP said, "I like to go home early on work nights so I can actually sleep," and didn't turn it into a test. When OP mentioned needing alone time, they said, "Cool, I'll use that to play some games and catch up on my own stuff." No sulking, no scorekeeping, no spreadsheet of favors pulled out later like a receipt. The real test came a few weeks in, when OP said, "Hey, I don't answer texts instantly anymore. That's a boundary from my last relationship." Instead of getting defensive, this new person smiled and said, "Thanks for telling me. I'm glad you know what you need now." They didn't rush the labels. They didn't push for sleepovers every night. They actually celebrated OP's independence, like watching someone rebuild a cozy little life and being honored to be invited in, not entitled to move all their stuff there on day 2. OP says they're not in a movie-style soulmate story yet. It's quieter than that. But as they sit there, late at night, phone face down, feeling strangely calm, they realize something important. The goal of healing was never to become invincible. It was to trust that if the red flags start appearing again, if the jokes cut too deep, if the pressure ramps up, if that low hum of dread returns, they will get up, walk out, and choose themselves without waiting for everything to collapse. And that, for them, is its own warm, fuzzy feeling of justice being served. Not karma really does come full circle in some dramatic explosion, but in a softer way. Every time they listen to their gut and leave, they're quietly rewriting the script. In the next story, you'll hear what happens when someone doesn't walk away soon enough, and how they finally snap out of it in the most unexpected way. Gentle recap: what these stories quietly taught us. So, before we drift any deeper into the night, let's just take a slow breath and look back at where we've been together. These stories can feel big and dramatic in the moment, but when you zoom out a little, some very quiet patterns start to show up. Over and over, we saw that it rarely starts with obvious cruelty. It starts with the pretty stuff. The love bombing, the constant texts, the surprise visits, the "I've never felt this way about anyone" speeches that feel like a movie soundtrack more than real life. At first it's cozy, flattering, like you've finally been picked for the right team. But tucked inside the flowers and late night music are little tests. Who do you text back? How fast? Who you're allowed to see? Then when you're already attached, the tone shifts. That's where the gaslighting creeps in. You remember what they said? They swear they never said it. You're hurt? They tell you you're too sensitive or joking. They keep a mental spreadsheet of every favor, every ride, every bill they paid, and suddenly normal kindness turns into scorekeeping. After everything I've done for you becomes a weapon instead of a warm, fuzzy feeling of justice being served on both sides. We saw financial control dressed up as "I'll take care of you," and isolation disguised as "I just don't like your friends, they're bad for you." Phone checks for your own safety. Guilt trips when you go out. The apartment that slowly turns into a little island where only their rules count. Emotional cruelty that hides inside jokes, backhanded compliments, and that cold, heavy, silent treatment that can fill a room louder than any party upstairs. And the thread running through all of it is how normal it can look at first. Toxicity doesn't usually kick the door in. It sneaks in, takes its shoes off, and acts like it lives there. That's why so many people in these stories didn't see it clearly until something snapped. The extra phone, the credit card bill, the moment they realized they were apologizing for things they hadn't done. But there's another pattern too, and it's the hopeful one. People leaving. People setting boundaries that used to terrify them. People finding a random Reddit post at 2 a.m. and realizing, oh, it's not just me. They lean on friends, on strangers online, on tiny bits of courage that grow each time they say no. They learn to trust that small, shaky voice that says, "This doesn't feel right," even when no one else can hear it yet. If any of these stories felt uncomfortably familiar, that doesn't mean you're doomed or broken. It means you're noticing. And noticing is powerful. It's the first little crack where light gets in. So, for now, you don't have to fix anything or decide anything. You can just rest. If you're still awake, welcome back to the channel in this soft, late-night way. And grab your favorite blanket if you haven't already. Let's dive into the gentle side of this. The quiet Minecraft world on your screen. The slow, steady vibrations of the music. The tiny sounds of blocks and footsteps. You can let your mind wander, let the stories blur at the edges, and just let this cozy, pixelated landscape help you drift off to sleep while we keep turning the pages for you in the background. Soft closing. You're not alone, even in the dark. And if your mind doesn't really want to wander right now, that's okay too. Sometimes these stories about toxic relationships don't just wash over you. They stick, they poke, they wake up old memories you thought were boxed up and shoved into the back corner of your mental apartment. So let me talk just to you for a second, like we're on a quiet call late at night. Volume low, lights soft, Minecraft humming in the background. If something in these stories feels a little too familiar, gaslighting, love bombing, that slow creep from sweet to scary, you're not weird, you're not overreacting, and you are definitely not the only one hearing echoes of your own past. Maybe you're still in it, trying to decide if what you're feeling is bad enough to count as toxic. Maybe you're freshly out, scrolling through Reddit and Minecraft videos like this because sleep is complicated and silence is loud. Or maybe it's been years, you've rebuilt, and these cozy revenge stories just tap on old bruises you mostly forget are there. Wherever you are on that timeline, you're not alone here. There are so many people listening right now who have been told, no one else will ever love you, and then found whole communities proving that was a lie. If your chest feels a little tight, or your stomach's doing that nervous party of butterflies, try one tiny act of self-care when this video ends. Nothing dramatic. Maybe you grab your favorite blanket and wrap it a little tighter. Maybe you drink some water, stretch your shoulders, or jot down one sentence in a journal like, I deserve to be spoken to kindly, and then close it. Even just giving yourself quiet credit. Hey, I listened, I reflected, I showed up for myself tonight, is a real valid step. And if you don't make it to the end because you fall asleep halfway through a story, honestly, that might be your brain doing some of its best work, drifting off while hearing other people finally set boundaries, finally walk away, finally get that warm, fuzzy feeling of justice being served can be its own kind of gentle reprogramming. If you miss a story, you can always come back tomorrow, rewind, and let's dive into the parts you snooze through. Think of this channel as that cozy corner you can return to on the nights when your thoughts get a little loud. I know, welcome back to the channel. Doesn't sound like the start of a healing journey, but over time, hearing how karma really does come full circle can make your own boundaries feel a little less impossible. In a minute, we're going to move into some of the most quietly powerful stories of the video. The ones where the revenge isn't a big dramatic blow up at all, but something much softer and, honestly, much braver. Quiet CTA. If this helped, you can stay a while. And sometimes that softer, braver revenge is just choosing yourself. Choosing to see the red flags for what they are, instead of what you wish they meant. If any of these stories felt a little familiar tonight, you're not alone. Most people don't realize a relationship is toxic while they're in the middle of it, because it builds slowly. One joke about your insecurities here. One, for your own safety, phone check there. If hearing other people finally say enough gave you that warm, fuzzy feeling of justice being served, there are plenty more cozy stories waiting for you here. On other nights, when your brain won't quiet down, you can always come back, grab your favorite blanket, and let's dive into another batch of Reddit stories over this calm little Minecraft world. Same soft music, same sleepy village lights, same blocky rivers just drifting by, while we talk about love bombing, gaslighting, and all the strange little ways karma really does come full circle. If you feel up to it, you can subscribe so you can find your way back here on the nights when everything feels a bit too loud. No pressure, no big smash the button moment, just a quiet, welcome back to the channel, waiting whenever you need company. You can also leave a comment if that feels comfortable. Your story, your boundary, this was the moment I realized it was toxic, might be the thing that helps someone else feel a little less crazy, a little less alone at 3 a.m. If you want a gentle place to start, you could share which red flag from these stories hit a little too close to home, or what boundary you wish you'd set earlier. Maybe it was the partner who slowly isolated you from friends and family, or the friend who only liked you when you were struggling, but got weirdly cold when you were doing well. You don't have to go into details you don't want to. Even a simple, yeah, I've been there, can be enough. And if right now you don't have the energy to type, that's completely okay. You don't have to subscribe, you don't have to comment, you don't have to do anything at all. You can just let the video play out, let the screen dim, and let yourself drift off to sleep while the Minecraft ambience keeps doing its slow, cozy thing in the background. Thank you for spending this part of your night here with me. I hope you feel a little safer, a little more seen, and a little more sure that your boundaries matter. Rest well, stay safe, and let the last few seconds just be quiet blocks, soft sounds, and you, finally, getting some sleep.